Good evening and welcome to the Lompoc City Council meeting. City Attorney will make a report from closed session, please.
There was no reportable action.
And this evening for our invocation we have Pastor Darren Hunt. If you'd all please rise.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we come before you today taking a moment to give thanks at this Thanksgiving time. Thank you that as this meeting gets underway, we can ask for your divine wisdom, help, and strength for these proceedings tonight. Thank you that you are never too busy to hear our pleas for help. Thank you that you are never too concerned about other matters to not also give attention to the matters that are weighing heavy upon us. Thank you that just as each one of us who has gathered in this room tonight or maybe watching this from home wants the best for this great city of Lompoc, you also want what is best for this city and its citizens. Thank you that you care for the least among us just as much as you care for the greatest among us. Tonight I pray that you would bless this city. I ask that you would give this mayor and these council members wisdom to be the leaders you've appointed them to be. Help them do what is right and not merely what is easy. Help them act swiftly and justly with fairness towards everyone and every matter that is to be considered. Finally, thank you for these men and women who will willingly serve this city as their mayor and council. Bless them as they desire to be a blessing to this fine city of Lompoc. In your most holy name, amen.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under presentations made elsewhere, on Thursday, November 7th, at the Lompoc Elks Lodge, I made a presentation to a proclamation declaring November 2013 as Lung Cancer Awareness Month, and I would add that the gentleman from the Lung Cancer Alliance that was there said that of the numerous events he had attended, ours in Lompoc was the largest, and they had 144 events this year in 32 countries. Yeah. So good to all of us. We stepped out and raised money for lung cancer awareness and went away better as a result. City Administrator's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and the community. I'd like to share with you that staff is preparing to finalize projects at the Aquatic Center and the Dick DeWeese Community and Senior Center that had been put on hold due to the dissolution of redevelopment agencies in 2012. So starting in January, we will proceed with the purchase and installation of items such as bleachers at the Aquatic Center, as well as pool covers, lane line replacements, and a sound system, among other things. At the Dick DeWeese Community and Senior Center, we will finish equipping the professional kitchens, purchase and install audio-visual equipment, a much-needed storage area, and a flagpole with the light and all the flags. So we're very excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any staff requests or announcements, City Clerk? And oral communications, this is your opportunity to speak to us for 5 minutes on any subject. If it is an item that's on tonight's agenda and you can wait, that would be better because we'll remember it more when we're talking about it. But if you can't wait and you have to leave, you can talk to us now. Is there anyone who wants to speak to us at this time? Going once? Going twice? Gone. Okay, no one for oral communications. Now we'll move to the consent calendar. These are kind of mundane items. This is our busy work business. Item number 1, approval of the minutes of June 18th and November 5th. Item number 2, approval of expenditures for payroll, $1.3 million, voucher register for $1.8 million, a voucher register for $799,000, and utility credit refunds for $1,200. I will not participate in the vote on checks number 316404 for $810 to Smitty's Towing and a check for 316441 for $786.24 for Lompoc Lock and Safe. Item number 3, amendment of the classification and compensation plans regarding the revised electrical utility engineer and new solid waste compliance coordinator job classifications. And these were job classification changes that were as a result of our current budget, so we're catching up on our paperwork. And item number 4, ordinance number 159513, amending the Lompoc Municipal Code, reestablishing and establishing speed limits on certain streets, a summary of action. And item number 5, the execution of documents for the application for State Department of Transportation matching funds for the Federal Aviation Administration grant for the Airport Apron Project design phase for the Lompoc Airport. And this is a grant that pays most of the cost, and then we make a little of it up out of the revenue from our airport, which is fully self-sustaining. Okay. Is there a council member that would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none, I'd accept a motion.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
And a second.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, we have 3 items here this evening, and I'm going to alter the order in which those occur based on a couple of things. We have one that's a really simple, quick adoption. I'm going to take that first. Then I'm going to see how many people are here for the other 2 items, and I'll put the one with the biggest crowd up next. So those of you who are here for the final the adoption of the general plan, would you please stand up? Okay, thank you. If you'd be seated, and those of you who are here for the MOU and the assorted documents for the motorsports park, please stand up. Yeah, that wasn't too hard, was it? Okay. So we're going to go to item number 8 first, the introduction of the ordinance for adoption by reference of the mandatory state building codes, since it's mandatory and it's from the state. And here to bring us the good news is our contract building official, Michael McGivney. Come on down.
Evening, Mayor, council members, city staff, and of course all of you. I appreciate you moving my item up. I certainly don't want to wait till the end of the evening. But for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Michael McGivney. I am a contract employee for Broadspec under contract with the city of Lompoc to manage their building department. I'm here tonight to introduce the 2013 California Building Code for your consideration and adoption. I would like to give a brief summary of the building and adoption process and spare you the long, grueling PowerPoint that I prepared, and I won't be using, thank God. So, the California Building Standards Code is adopted every 3 years by California legislation. The city and counties may amend these codes if they have valid findings, based on at least one of the conditions, either by climatic, geographical, or topographical. A staff is amending California Building Code 903.2 regarding the fire sprinkler requirements relating to square footage. If there are questions about these amendments, Kurt is here. He can speak about the fire requirements. Anyway, these amendments hopefully will be pushed through. There are significant changes in the new California Building Code we'll be dealing with after the new year. And certainly we will be holding a public workshop that after the first year to help decipher through the new codes. There's quite a few. I've only have 2 significant changes books that are about a third of the size of volumes of most of the building codes. So and some of the things I might add have lessened the intensity of demand. So that's a good thing. The building department staff has been encouraging applicants, just to give you a note, the building department has been encouraging applicants to submit plans with the new 2013 codes to try not to have a debacle at the end of the year with people carrying them over. I know when I first came here 2 years ago, they were still dealing with the code cycle from previously. So all plans, we have been telling, as I said, at the counter, we've posted on the city's website back in October about these, trying to encourage applicants to bring them forward quickly. What it says on the city website, all plans submitted for review under the 2010 California Building Code must be approved, issued, and paid for before December 31st, 2013. No extensions will be allowed on permits issued under the 2010 California Building Code after January 1st, 2014. Once issued, permits will have 180 days, of course, at their first legitimate passing inspection. Otherwise, the permit becomes invalid. So all that said, and we get to the end here, the staff are recommending the City Council waive further readings and introduce the ordinance number 1596-13 to adopt by reference and mandatory state building codes in the Lompoc Municipal Code and set a public hearing for adoption of the state building codes by reference December 17, 2013.
Any questions for Mike before I call the chief up to explain the fire sprinkler changes? Nope. Good job, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Chief?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, audience, those of you at home, I don't see this as a significant change. However, in reviewing the building code and then the fire code that we'll be bringing forward to you hopefully in January, I found an interesting exemption, and that exemption is for commercial buildings 5,000 square feet and above, you had to have fire sprinklers, unless you were an office building, and then you didn't have to sprinkle until 10,000. It's an interesting exemption given the fact that you typically have a higher density of folks and fire loading in office buildings. So when we had an opportunity to bring the building code forward, because the building code always has the sprinkler ordinance in it as the primary, I recommended that we align it so it's across the board for non-residential. Anything 5,000 and above is going to get fire sprinklers. This ties directly into staffing, response times, etc. We feel that it's a justified change.
And this is for new construction or remodels beyond a certain dollar threshold?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any questions for the chief? Thank you. And I'm going to open this for public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to us about the new ordinance? No one standing up. Going once, going twice. Close public comment. Come back for any further questions from the council. Anyone have a question? Councilmember Holmdahl.
I don't have a question, but I'm glad the way you answered the one question we had, that I had earlier, is that if you have a permit in that's been accepted by the city itself, you can go ahead. The new ordinance does not take effect. So anybody that's got the permit in, got it signed off, you don't have to go ahead with anything new that's put in there. So that's a major component and that I was concerned about anybody in the building.
Okay, seeing no other lights, would someone care to make a motion?
I'll move we accept the recommendations.
And a second. And is there any further discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. And now we'll return to item number 7. Review and adoption of a resolution approving the application for grant funds from the State of California Department of Parks, Recreation, Off-Road Highway Vehicle Grant Funds, and consideration of a memorandum of understanding with the Lompoc Valley Parks Recreation Pool Foundation for Phase 1 environmental review for the proposed motorsports park at the Lompoc Airport Assessor's Parcel. You don't want to hear all those. And all those numbers. Lucille Breeze.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members, members of the community. As the mayor indicated, we are here to discuss the MOU for the proposed motorsport park, and it is recommended that the council hold the public hearing, consider the material presented in the staff report, adopt resolution number 5866-13, approving the application for grant funds from the State of California Department of Parks and Recreation Off-Highway Vehicle Division, and review and approve the memorandum of understanding with the Lompoc Valley Parks and Recreation Pool Foundation for Phase 1 of the Motorsports Park project. This is the environmental review. To authorize the interim city administrator to sign the MOU or provide alternative direction to staff. The background explains the steps that we've taken to get to this place in time. And one note is the reason that we're asked for the resolution is that it is a part and a requirement of the grant for the city to acknowledge the responsibility in accepting the grant funds and to allow the city administrator to execute any agreements that are necessary related to the project. So that once that resolution is adopted by council, if it is, then we will forward it to the state and we will begin the process of working through the agreements that need to be signed. The memorandum of understanding is between the city and the foundation group subcommittee, and we've had a number of meetings with the group and gone over the information in the MOU and the attachments. This evening we did reprint and provide to the council the grant allocation pages out of the grant. I believe there was some, when the printing off the website, there were some pages that were not printed correctly or duplications, so we just gave you a new set so that you would have that information. Additionally, Exhibit A was revised, and I think I still have that. I'm sorry, the intent of that was just to show more accurately where the skydiver actually does land on the property and to show the extent of the property. There were a number of issues during our meetings with the subcommittee that we discussed, and those are identified on page 6 of the staff report, and I believe we've come to an agreement on most of the issues, and they would be just conducting the site assessment, the ability for the group to be able to hold some fundraising. We would be able to do that at a staff level with a temporary use permit, so it wasn't necessary to include that language in our MOU. In the discussing the easement road on the western edge of the property, that will be a discussion item during future phases of the project. Phase 1, as I noted, is simply the intended environmental review of the proposed project. The city will be going out with an RFP to environmental groups that are on our list, and we will solicit a scope of review and select an environmental consultant to prepare the document. The document is the city's document, and so the city will sign the contract with the consultant on that. Additionally, we have listed the phases. Phase 1, once Phase 1, the environmental impact report, is completed, the funds for that phase, whether the project were to go forward or not, the city would not have to repay that particular phase of the project. Once construction begins and we're into Phase 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then we are committed to using the funds of the grant and proceeding forward so that the off-highway vehicle portion, which is what the grant covers, is completed and those funds are utilized in the manner that the state has agreed to. We will have the opportunity to look at some of the funding and perhaps it is a 3-year grant because we are in the first segment of the grant, which is the development. So you're allowed extra time. Usually the grants are a 1-year grant. We will have 3 years to complete the initial portions of our project. And during that time, the foundation is allowed to, they're doing their fundraising, making their matching grant, the matching funds for the grant. And they're also allowed, as the operation begins, to apply for additional grants. Those will be applied for by the foundation and not by the city. The city had to do the first grant in order to get things up and running. So additionally, I'd like to note we've had discussion about the insurance, and there seems to be a discrepancy between the staff report, or not really a discrepancy, but I think it's just terminology. The insurance which was agreed to would be a requirement for the amount of $1 million, and that would be during the development phase, which is generally the first 3 phases. In phase 4, there will actually be, is it 3? Yeah, there will be operation. So once the operation comes in, we would be looking at what would be necessary further down the line. As we go forward, we will be amending and bringing back to council the phases of the MOU and the additional steps that are going to be necessary to bring the project to fruition. That basically completes my staff report, and I'm available for any questions.
Councilmember Costa?
Thank you, Marilyn. Ms. Breeze, can you give me an idea of what the responsibility is on behalf of the city in regards to managing those grant funds and that contract, essentially?
For the grant that the city has, we will be the one who is responsible for documenting all of the funds that are expended. We will have to, any staff time, we will have to allocate, and we are allowed generally to, as things are completed, as tasks are completed, we submit billings to the state with all of our documentation, and then we receive the funds from the state. There are some instances where we would be able to, upon request and discussion with the state, we might be able to get some funds in advance if they were necessary for us to pay a consultant or that type of thing. So that would be terms that we would be working out with the state as we go through.
But technically, when a purchase is made, the funds would be coming directly out of, to make it very simple, the city's bank account.
In the beginning, yes, unless we are able to get some advance funds from the state.
Okay, so what is the role of the organization in the grant relationship?
The matching funds are being provided, and part of the reason that we gave you the grant allocation is that it shows matching funds in there. It shows what we anticipate as an educated estimate of what the costs will be for some of these features that are going to be occurring. There's in the very beginning, obviously, we have a rough estimate for environmental impact report. We don't know what that's going to cost. We have a rough estimate for some habitat mitigation. For some of the things that we just, based on an educated guess, we put some numbers in there. If those numbers are high, and then we could use that fund for perhaps some other development, or if they're low, we might have to request funding be adjusted and put back into the that particular use. So we've got an overall number, and there may be some fluctuation in there.
Thank you. The other question is, you mentioned that we would put out an RFP for the environmental consultant, and that is based on a requirement or just based on common practice in the city?
No, that is based on the fact that we have a number of environmental consultants that we use for different projects, And the committee has indicated they would like to see us expand and look at some additional consultants. So what we will do is we will prepare an RFP and send that out to our list of environmental consultants. And then we will have a review process where we score those applications. Because it is a city document, the city will be the one who is in charge of the contract, who actually signs the contract with the consultant.
But again, is that, okay, two questions. When you send out the RFP, that will go to the organization's preferred consultant as well?
Indeed.
And we're doing that because it is a requirement of the city, or just because it is standard practice? I didn't get the answer to that, I'm sorry.
We will sometimes sole source a project, so it isn't necessarily that we go out with RFPs for every project. We do them occasionally, and we will do it for a larger project. We did it for our general plan. We sent out an RFP to just see what, what experience there is and what the price point is among the various consultants. You give a very specific list of what needs to be done, and then the consultants generally have sub-consultants working with them, and they give you a basic price.
And the review of those proposals, will that include the organization as well?
No, the city is the one who does the actual review, and they're the ones who actually have the criteria for what is necessary, what are the technical requirements are.
But I guess because they have matching funds going into this, correct? Some of those matching funds are going to be going towards this environmental consultant, is that right?
That would be correct.
Is there any way to get them involved in that review process simply because they would be paying for half of that service?
What we would generally do, any developer who comes in and is paying for the full document, they are told we have this is the consultant the city would be using for this. If there is a problem, if the developer is not, has had problems, or this is not someone that they would like to use, then we would go to the next person on the list. So we would do the same with them as we would do with any developer, but ultimately it's the city's decision because it is the city's document.
Yeah, I think the argument here about it being a public-private partnership and them technically not being a developer in the very traditional sense leads me to maybe we can be a little bit more flexible on that and maybe work a little bit together in choosing someone that we're both satisfied with. But I just want to kind of hear the discussion with council. That was just some ideas I was putting forward.
Well, we would do that with any developer. We would choose somebody, as I said, if there's an objection to the person that we would initially choose, then we would certainly consider that from any developer. We would not choose a consultant that the developer was not satisfied and happy with.
Okay, and my other question is this map, and pardon me if I'm incorrect, we haven't seen this version of this map yet. Is that correct, with the skydive target?
That one was just prepared today, and it is an expansion of the one that was part of the actual staff report.
Is this available to the public? Can we put this up?
I left copies out in the front.
Okay, for the people watching, I know it gets frustrating. People at home don't know what we're talking about. I have no idea if the camera can see this or not. But just so the public's aware, the map I'm looking at here is the skydive target. So were we not aware of this when we originally started this discussion, or is this?
We're aware of it. However, it's a generalized type map, and we will have that up on our website tomorrow. Anything that you received this evening that was not provided previously, we will have up on the website tomorrow.
And so have we contacted the company that runs the skydive service out at the airport about this project?
Yes, the Public Works Director and the City Engineer have met with them.
And what's the initial feedback?
I believe they're aware of the project, and here, Mr. McCune will be able to address that better than I can.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kevin McCune, Public Works Director. Yes, I met with David Hughes, Santa Barbara Skydive. We went over the staff report, the MOU, and asked him basically to, if we could address his questions here rather than if he had any concerns, I would pass them along. He said he was generally happy, and he actually supports the project, and he was looking forward to the project moving forward. His only concern was what was, I think, led to the change was, hey, when you look at that exhibit, it shows my gravel target area, and it didn't really show that there's actually another criteria, which is the clear area. So there's the place that they're aiming for, and then there's also this area where it has to be clear of trees and those type of things, so in case they get off course, they don't run into something. And he said he asked us to make the council aware of that because he understands that he may have to move, and there's kind of some reshuffling that'll need to happen. So he wanted you to understand that that was one of the things was important to him.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
I don't know if, are we going to have a representative from the project speak this evening?
Yes.
If they could just address that, that would be appreciated, what the plan would be for that, because it looks like there could be some issue because it is over the kids 50cc area, so we would have to discuss kind of how to mitigate that issue. But I think that's all the questions I have for now. Thank you.
It actually has a new location of the plan that's not shown on here. Yeah.
Me?
No. Are you done? Okay. Councilmember Starbuck.
Yeah, just a couple of things before we go into council discussion or public comment here that I had. Their money, their choice. Why can't we let them choose who they want for this? I'm not understanding why the city's stepping into this process so hard for the EIR here. I think when we discuss it, I think that we should really give this group the benefit of the doubt on who they use. They're the money on it. That's the first thing. Environmental documents down in that area, do we interface at all with the Riverbend Park, the California Space Authority, Hancock Public Safety Center, all these that fringe around? This causes a specific EIR for this area, this project?
Yes.
Yes, this project, when you're looking at environmental impacts, you look at a site-specific project. So what you're looking at is the project description, how it is presented, and whatever impacts that specific project will cause on the environment.
So going down there and cutting down trees for a landing area is not an environmental impact, but when we go down there to start the 50cc, it is an environmental impact.
Well, this is something that will be studied, and it will be reviewed and looked at. We do have habitat area that we're aware of in that site, and so there will be studies that will be required by both the State Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we will also have requirements for a traffic study. There will be a number of impacts that you have to look at per the CEQA requirements.
Okay. The other thing that, I wanted to kind of bring up right now, too, is there seemed to be a lot of access to this site that we're going to restrict this group from having access to it. And I'm not real sure why we're not giving somebody on the motorsports a key, but we have skydivers with keys. We're getting ready to sign an MOU with motorsports down there, but I don't think we have any kind of an understanding with the skydive people that I've been able to find. So I'm kind of wondering which side of our face we're going to talk about on letting people go down there and look at things, but we'll discuss.
Any other questions for Lucille this time? Okay, thank you, Lucille.
Thank you.
And now I would invite folks from the Motorsports Committee to make a presentation to us. Welcome. And I think we have the co-chairman. So we're going to get tag teamed.
Let's try a tag team. Carl Creel, I'm the chairman for the Lompoc Valley Motorsports Committee. Accompanying me tonight is Will Scott, my co-chair, and Jim Mosby, the president of the Lompoc Valley Park Rec and Pool Foundation. Hopefully we can field any of the questions that you have. If not, somebody in the audience, possibly with our committee, can. So just want to move forward then. Just want to make an opening statement about the project and then we'll go into the talking points about the MOU. Since it was organized almost 3 years ago, the Motorsports Committee has worked very hard to unite the community to fulfill the dream of creating a Lompoc Motorsports recreational venue. During that time, committee members have donated countless hours of their personal time, from their personal lives, from their families, to attend meetings, hold swap meets, car shows, anything to promote the project and raise funds. It's been a very somewhat thankless task. We've put a lot into this because it is a community project. We want something for the community, and we're working very hard with nothing but the passion for the project. So the committee's also participated in the Old Town markets, most of them actually over the past couple seasons. We've promoted our project and the Old Town Market project itself. In the past year, we've also taken on the responsibility of building and running the Kids Moto Fun Park, which focuses on helping kids learn to ride motorcycles safely in a safe environment. Now, this achievement itself is a great example of our community coming together for a common cause. It was done in a short amount of time with no expense really from the community, for the city. It was donated materials, a lot of free labor, and amazingly it was done in like 3 or 4 days. Since that time, we've been running it with volunteers, once again giving of their personal time almost every weekend. So this project shows how we've been blessed with the assistance of some wonderful community-minded people that helped us build this project, and it's wonderful that they've committed their labor and resources to help us. It also shows that this is a project for the community, by the community. We at the Motorsports Committee would like to thank all our sponsors, the public, city council and staff, and the many volunteers who have been working with us for nearly 3 years. We're getting closer to the reality of building a motorsports complex for the community. And now, as you all know, with the generous grant from the state OHV Parks Division, we are closer still. We are looking forward to completing the MOU with the city. However, we are seeking help from the council to amend a few issues that we've already brought up. But hopefully it'll make it'll better MOU document for both parties. So if we want to move forward to the environmental impact review, Lucille has already discussed that. And our take generally is that since we are paying the bulk of this, it's coming from the grant, but we have to come up with the other half of it, and any overruns, we feel that we should be involved in the selection process. So that's already been voiced. I think Ashley brought that up. But since we are a public-private partnership, we think there should be some flexibility in the process. And I think the putting it out, it's called, an RFP, is a time-consuming process. And I'd like to see us pick a likely candidate based on their abilities and be able to move forward with it. We have the prospectus or resume for our choice, which is TRA Environmental Sciences of Menlo Park, and I think the paperwork that you all have shows that they're a pretty impressive organization. Their staff has impressive resumes. They are a company that has worked in the area. They have experienced different projects that are motorsport oriented, which I think is the key to this, and they've worked with most of the agencies that Lucille mentioned that we'd have to interact with. So I think that pretty much says it all. That would be our preference for the environmental consultant.
Are you saying that you would, rather than going through an RFP process, you want to just go to these guys?
I would prefer that, yes. I think it's this is not your average project like we've discussed. We're not a developer looking to put up a skyscraper or something. We're a volunteer organization trying to do something for the community. And I think the way that the consultants have been chosen in the past has been a matter of policy. And I think there should be some flexibility allowed for a community volunteer organization.
Okay.
The second point was brought up at the meetings with staff in regards to the debris that's on the property. We're aware that there's different types of debris there. There's chunks of concrete, there's rebar and trash lumber, things of that nature down there, because it is basically an abandoned industrial site. We proposed that we would do the cleanup, providing the labor, transportation. All we're asking is that the city would either waive fees or have an alternate payer. Maybe the airport, since it's airport property, would be appropriate. But we couldn't come to an agreement with staff on that either, so. And then Lucille mentioned the general insurance liability cost, and she stated that they had agreed to $1 million through the first 3 phases, I believe, and we'd like to see that carried through the entire project.
Not the operation portion?
Well, the operational portion is dictated by the sanctioning organizations that we would be dealing with, the racers organizations, and they all are, appropriately based to have the secondary insured, which would be the city and the organizations themselves. So the dollar amounts that they would require would be more than adequate.
Okay, so you're saying through the construction portions, but not through the operation portion of either one?
Right.
So access to the site is not an issue then with this MOU?
I agree exactly with what you said, Mr. Starbuck. The Skydiver organization has unlimited access to the property, and we would not desire to hinder him in any manner, but we would like access also. To have to get a staff member to allow us to enter the property, to show it, or to evaluate it, or do cleanup is, I think, kind of a hindrance to moving forward. Plus, it increased costs, staff time.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, and the committee, just wanted to share that with the insurance, we did designate the development phases, so we are saying the same thing. During the development phases, it would be $1 million, and then operations would be determined later.
Okay.
As far as the access, just want to share the difference between the Skydive as a tenant now, and I know we are working towards an agreement that would be in one of the further phases where they would be tenants as well. In this first phase, we'd like to coordinate access just for the coordination of our other tenants on the property, and we have an on-site person that can be allow them access with very reasonable notifications. So we are committed to try and work with you on that and make sure that if you need to show someone around, a donor, that we can do that with short notice, because there is someone on site most all the time. There is a host on site at the airport.
Thank you. Go ahead.
What was that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's all I have to say. The talking points, if there's any other feedback.
Okay, how about the 2 guys standing behind you? Have they got a speech, or are they just backing you up?
Any
Just
questions?
here to answer questions.
Yeah. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, Will, how many years have we been trying to get a motorsports park in the Lompoc Valley? Because I know you know.
Well, I have an answer for you through another person, if I could. Ed, when was the first time you and I talked about a drag strip in Lompoc? I believe a little earlier than that. When did you come to Lompoc? What year?
1977.
Quite a number of years.
Okay. Well, welcome to the front and center.
The first time I did is when Santa Maria closed the third time. They stole our rodeo. I thought maybe we could go over and steal their drag strip. Thank you.
Okay, let me move to council questions just briefly, and then I want to go to oral communications. Is there any question? And then we'll get them back up for some questions here.
I just wanted to make one more comment in regards to the insurance. if it indeed would be feasible to have it $1 million through the entire construction phase, we'd like that noted in the MOU specifically, so.
The language in the MOU does indicate that during the development phase, it's $1 million.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one more question.
And I think Bob beat you to it. Councilmember Lingle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. In regards to the access, now, our city administrator said you'd be able to have almost immediate access, but I know in the staff report, it says with 24-hour notice. So I'm a little confused with immediate access because someone's on site or 24 hours. So what are we looking at, immediate or 24 hours?
Good question. Let me clarify. We would prefer 24 hours notice, but if you have a situation where that just isn't feasible, give us a call and we will try and accommodate. We just need to let our tenant, depending on what it is you want to look at and where you want to go, we just have to coordinate with tenants and how they are using the property as well. So that's how we'd like to approach it.
Well, the access that we were really looking for was that if someone were to come up and want to donate money, and generally, these people come up after hours, so to try and get hold of someone after hours to allow us to get on the property could be a problem, And I would definitely want to accommodate somebody that wanted to donate money.
Yeah, and the other part of this is realize that within this document, they're required to pay for all city staff time. So if we were calling somebody out on a weekend and they were a union employee and we had to pay overtime, that could get 4 hours, a time and a half could get kind of pricey. Councilmember Costa.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the host that is there 7 days a week. So we would not need to call somebody out on the weekend, especially for that.
Good. Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Mayor Lynn. I just actually have one final question for Ms. Breeze. Thank you. I don't have any questions for you. Ms. Breeze, if you could confirm for me if this is correct. We do not specifically have to go out to an RFP for an EIR, but we do for contracts that are in excess of $125,000 or more. Is that correct? But it's common practice that across the board, we go out for $125,000 or more. Or is that different?
That's correct.
Thank you, City Attorney.
I'm sorry. Yeah, City Attorney, could you state that again, please?
That's correct.
No. Recap what you told her that she told us, so I hear it from your lips, or Mr. Clerk, depending on how you want it.
Your municipal code requires professional service contracts to have an RFP if it's for more than $125,000, but there's an exception if it's for environmental review because of the nature of the environmental review and because of the fact that most of the time that's paid for by a developer. Here it's half paid for by a developer. So that's why your municipal code has that exception.
So it does not necessarily have to go out?
Correct.
Good. Okay.
It doesn't, but I do.
So confused.
I do, and Ms. Breeze or City Attorney Pannoni, either one of you could actually field this. There are benefits for requests for proposals. Could you just summarize some of the benefits of going out to RFP in the city's perspective?
In the city's perspective, what going out for an RFP is we state to the prospective consultants the exact information that we require. We have them create all of the studies and do the interaction with the agencies, all of the sub-studies that need to be done with the sub-consultants, traffic studies, noise studies. They're all prepared under the original consultant, and all this information is provided to every person that we send the RFP out to. So when we get back the information, we have a matrix and we go through to make sure that we are receiving all of the information, the technical information from the people with the qualifications to provide us with the best legally defensible document that we can provide to the city at the most reasonable price for the city and the developer both.
So then what it comes down to is legal defensibility and an appropriate cost associated.
And technical expertise. We need to make sure that we have all of the studies are prepared by qualified consultants.
It's also, if I may add to that, it's also helpful for our staff to be able to compare whether someone really gets it, understands it, because when you send an RFP out, they have to respond to you in such a way that they know that they understand the project that you want, and so that's another reason to send an RFP before you actually sign our contract. You have someone who understands what the needs are.
Thank you. So I'm not convinced that we don't necessarily need to go out for an RFP because it is common practice. There are values to that. But I think what we need to do is be a little bit flexible in working with the organization perhaps. But I'm really curious to hear what the public has to say, and maybe we can debate this further at a later time.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Well, you said earlier, Lucille, that when you go out and you receive the list of consultants for the environmental impact, that the customer at that point can accept them or not. So really the simple way out for the motorsports guys is we do the RFP, we get all the input, and then they just keep saying no until they get who they want. They have that right to do that, correct?
There would have to be some basis for them to turn down every environmental impact consultant. We would have a matrix.
They're paying and they don't like them? I'm just saying, you know, that if they wanted to go.
Let her finish. Let her finish.
We would have a matrix of qualifications, and we would have the information showing the cost of the study by each of the people and each of the consultants. And as Mr. Pannoni said, we need to make sure that the consultant who's selected, and it may be the consultant that the Motorsports Committee is bringing forward, I wouldn't know at this point until we send it out and we look at the information that we receive back, and we also hold interviews.
Okay, but in the meantime now, they're paying for the preparation of the RFP, they're paying for the matrix and everything else that's happening, correct?
Well, it's all the staff time that's required to prepare the information to go out.
Right, which will be paid for by the Motorsports Committee.
Half.
Well, part of it is through the grant.
50-50. Okay. Seems like a good point to stop, and now we'll go to oral communication. This is your opportunity out there in the audience to come and talk to us about this subject. I will begin by those of you who would like to say something for 1 minute, which might be, I'm in favor of it or I'm opposed to it. So everybody that's got the one, not you, Carl. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. So everyone that would like to speak for 1 minute, stand up, come over, and get in line. Oh, come on, there's got to be more takers than that.
Okay, I'm Mary Saladino, just a citizen here in Lompoc, and I don't know a lot about this subject, so I have a few questions just by listening. Recently, I had the privilege of being in this room to hear that, I think it was Joe Parrott, who was representing information that the fire department in the city would need to know to coordinate in order to reach the great decisions that were made in regard to our fire department. That man stood here and gave an excellent presentation on PowerPoint with every detail that was needed for everybody to know about safety, why this thing needed to be done, why that money needed to be spent, and everything else. I'm sitting back there and I can barely hear or decipher what is being said, and I know they are speaking directly to you, but I think a project this big needs more information presented clearly with detail.
Thank you.
And
your time's
I
up.
did not understand I guess my minute is up. I didn't understand the part about the 24-hour host and how long these motorsports are going to be operating.
We're going to talk more about this. This
Okay.
is just to get your questions into our discussion. And next, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Corinne Lewis, and I live in close proximity to the motorsports park. I am not against motorsports. I love Steve McQueen. But I know that I will be impacted environmentally by this project. I am concerned about the noise pollution near my neighborhood. I'm also concerned about pollution in general. And I do believe in protecting the creatures in the river basin. However, I'm just making this point. My last point was I was concerned about the access and what the fire department would do in the event of an emergency. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening, Maryland, Lompoc City Council and audience. My name is Victor Young. I'm from Camarillo. Well, I'm not a local from here. I'm here this evening to support the building of the Motorplex, Motorsport Complex. The reason I'm supporting it is because, as many of us know, young people and older ones like myself, we always have the quest for speed, which I always try to make things go faster. And a lot of young people today race their cars on the road, and we know they get into trouble, accidents, and worse. The law comes in, the police comes and tickets people. Well, that's just a temporary fix, a Band-Aid. I think the real fix is to have a legal racetrack where people can go and release their testosterone and test the speed there. So again, I encourage the City Council and all powers to be to I encourage you folks to build this, help build this track and move forward. And
thank you.
Not to mention the financial gain the city will get. Thank you.
All right.
May I approach the council? I want to give you a list of high school students in San Luis Valley that we have changed their lives, their futures.
Wait till you get back to the microphone. We'll let you pass it out, then we'll give you your minute.
All right.
All right. We'll share here.
How you doing, Mayor? Okay, I don't know if I had enough.
Yeah, we'll share.
My name is Art Foster. I'm working with the Santa Maria Valley High Schools. All of them, Rigetti, Pioneer, Santa Maria High School, Orchid Academy. I'm training kids in motorsports, and we're starting at freshman year. What we're doing is getting them ready for the future. This track in Lompoc, if it goes through, will aid in that, because simply I'm working with college students because I'm also a Hancock teacher. I'm teaching Hancock fundamentals in automotive to Lompoc students, Cabrillo students, Buellton students, and we only got 2 in my class that's from Santa Maria. They're all from this area. And so I'm really affected about this because we need this race facility. It is an aid to our young people, from freshmen on up to the little ones on up. And we proved the points. We got our kids working in vocational trades. They're working in industries. They're going into the Air Force, the Marines, all coming out of racing programs. All of them coming out of racing programs.
Wrap up, please.
Okay, that's what I wanted to let you know, that I'll be part of this facility, bringing our kids out of the valley into Lompoc and competing.
Thank you. Okay, I forgot to say the rules, so all of you know, we don't applaud, we don't boo until we get to the end. When we get all done and we have a vote, then we'll do what we're going to do. But in the meantime, we just let speakers speak. I appreciate your consideration.
Hi, my name is Ed Ross, retired automotive machinist, engine builder for 50 years. I've been involved with many kids, adults, old folks, everybody else that wants some kind of performance out of their vehicle. It's we're in a day when if there's no access to this type of thing, there are no people coming up to replace the technicians and help with getting all your cars fixed at the dealerships and whatnot. I mean, this has become a real big problem, and through this type of motorsports issue, it's always been beneficial for that reason, for no other. Also here representing the Central Coast Street Rods, who's been together for 41 years, as well as the Motorsports Park Project, and I believe I wish I had been given the wisdom that the pastor talked about earlier on tonight, but anyways, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for working on it since 1970.
Hi, my name is Peter Lewis. I want to state my position right away as being opposed to a motorsport parts in our midst. And I want to refer to something the mayor said in his last debate for mayor with his opponent, that we should all be willing to put up with a little inconvenience so that the kids can have some fun. I'm not sure what the man in front of me was saying about whether he's supporting this or not, because my ears aren't so good, but I just don't think that the future is going to, motorsports is not going to help us get anywhere in the future. Motorsports, we were all, enthusiasts when we were kids, when we were teenagers, when gas was 50 cents a gallon. At this point, I just don't want a future for our kids that looks like Mad Max. I don't believe that, it's giving them any kind of guidance, to have them out there chasing each other around a motocross track or down a drag strip. I think that's irresponsible, and it's not a road into the future that I want for our children. I also think that.
I need you to wrap up, sir.
Pardon me?
I need you to wrap up. You're over your minute.
Am I done?
You are, but if you have a closing sentence.
I heard you say that, that I also wanted to make one more point to the homeowners in this, that there is a point at which when you're trying to sell your house, you have to disclose any nearby nuisance. And I heard you say over at Providence Landing last summer that the noise that a motorsports park would make, just a drag strip part, would sound half as loud as that sound an F-16 fighter would make if you were standing directly next to it at takeoff at full throttle. Now if it's just a drag strip that would sound that loud.
I need you to wrap up, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. You need to let the next person speak. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ron Mose. I live on Rinconcito above the old drive-in theater. I'm undecided at this point in time, but what I am opposed to is the lack of information that's been coming out to the public about this project. This is a huge project. I appreciate the association wanting a motocross since 1977. But I have questions about the location. In 1977, the airport was at the north end of town. There was nothing around it. In the last 30-something years, the airport's almost in the center of the town. So I would like to see a map where this thing is going to go. There's nothing available in the paper. You get an occasional blurb in the news press about this meeting taking place. I have no idea. I couldn't hear what was going on tonight with the EIR. I know an RFP is a request for proposal. There needs to be more openness of what's going on here. And I'm not saying anybody's been hiding it. It's just we need more information so I can make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, council members, mayor. This is Michelle Toniazzini. I'm with the Motorsport Park project, and I just wanted to make a point about as far as the expenditures of money and distribution. It just would be really nice if we could all make a decision together instead of the back and forth. Here's our decision. No, we don't get along. And we want to do it this way. It would just be really nice if we could just make decisions about the money together. That's all I want to say.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Randy. I just have a question about the need for an RFP with regard to the CEQA environmental impact study. What I heard was normally these costs are paid by the developer. We know it's a 1 to 2 year process, very long, and there's no RFP required when a developer does it. So why is there a need with the city and the committee is doing it jointly? Why is there an additional legal defense that's required just because it's done by the city as opposed to the developer? Isn't it the same documents? Isn't it the same requirements? Isn't it the same process? So I don't understand why there's a difference.
I think we'll get some more answers on that after we get all everybody's questions.
How's it going, Mayor, Council, audience? My name is Adam Cameron. I'd just like to state that I was in trouble my whole life for being off-roading and everything. And ever since I started building motors and working automotive, it's kept me out of trouble. I want to see that help with other juveniles and help them stay out of trouble, being a place where it's actually allowed instead of they have to go behind back and get in trouble for it. Another thing is, I still don't understand the access. I believe that at least our chair should have access to it so one of our members can call him and be able to take somebody out and show somebody that's looking into donating. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Carl Doran. I've lived here since 1962. I basically grew up racing motorcycles down in the riverbed. Expansion chambers, no silencers, just to go as fast as you could. At one time in the early 70s, mid-70s, we had a motocross track down at the river park where the soccer fields are now, and that was highly popular. We had mud bogs that raced down there. Lompoc's been an automotive racing motorcycle community as long as I can ever remember, and will testify before I can remember it's always been that way. It can keep kids out of trouble. It'll keep kids off the street, and if it can keep one person from dying, it has to be worth it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. George, you want the 1 minute one? I'm going to go to the next level.
I'm going to go to the next level.
Okay. Now we're going to go to the 5 minute there we go. Oral communication. And you don't have to talk for 5 minutes. If the guy in front of you says what you wanted it to be said, you can just stand up and say, ditto for him. Okay? Because there's about 70 or 80 of you out here, and if we add that by 5 minutes, it's going to be a long night. So, come on down. George, you're first.
Mr. Mayor, council members, members of the community, my name is George Bedford. I'll do a little plug right now. I operate Sunset Auto Center, so I have a vested interest in wanting to see a motorsports park. That being said, I also have a perspective. I operated the airport from 71 to 1985. So I have a knowledge of what went on down on the riverbed because my partner and I had control of virtually the whole airport. The county had a little flood control office that's right by the gate just as you go down into the riverbed. Johnny Dufresne operated that, and we have two things in common. I lost my job at Air Research in Redondo Beach when the mole project got canceled. I got my job up here at the airport at the same time Johnny was tearing down the mole project out of Slick 6. So a lot of equipment went past that little hut we had down there as an airport headquarters. Down into the riverbed. It was stored down there. Rebar, concrete, everything. They had to clean it up quite a bit. But the bottom line is it never did get completely cleaned up. And I heard someone mention habitat. When John Dufresne was operating down there was no habitat. There was concrete, rebar, and a constant motion of large trucks, large cranes moving around down there. So if someone finds an underwater squirrel down there that seems to be endangered to the rest of us, it came there later. Okay? But I'm also a drag racer. I've obviously, one person mentioned one thing, and I've probably lost a lot of my testosterone, so I'm qualified to speak as an old person also. But the bottom line is, this is a project that we've wanted to do for a long time. We had a very successful mud bog here for a long time until the county got involved. That shut that project down just with costs. And if you want to continue to layer costs on this project, you could probably shut it down. And I think a lot of people in town would be happy if that's exactly what you do. But I would not be one of them, and most of the people in here tonight would not be one of them. So somewhere there has to be compromise. I think when people talk about drag racing and drag strips, they talk about what they see on television. You're not going to be running top fuel dragsters down in the river bottom, okay? First of all, it's going to be an 8-mile track, which limits the speed anyhow. And any sanctioning body we have now made us put those stupid mufflers on our cars. Okay? So mufflers are required on any motor vehicle, including the little putt-putt cycles that they're going to be running down there. So is it an inconvenience for some people? Yes, it's an inconvenience for some people. It's going to be an inconvenience. But you know what? In 1971, the airplanes we were flying off of that airport were an inconvenience for some people around town. We had one particular person who's still alive in this town that had a 185 Cessna with a huge prop on it. He woke up the whole valley every single Sunday morning. But fortunately, everybody got up and went to church when he took off. But it was a lot smaller valley at that time, I realize that. But we still have noise off that airport. Now we're allowing larger jets to come in and operate at that airport that were not allowed then. I think it's a good project for the city. I think it's a good project for the community and the whole regional area. You're going to draw in a lot of people from outside the area. Now, there's a certain group in town that hates that. But those of us who are in business in this community, trying to survive, trying to keep all of our employees at work, would appreciate more people coming into town. And the beauty of drag racers, they come in for the weekend. They're here Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They get their butts out of town. So we don't have to deal with their traffic all week long. So that's about all I have to say about the project. I'm for the project. I hope it moves forward. But like I said, this council can kill it with costs. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Okay, if you're interested in speaking, start coming and making a line.
Mayor, City Council, my name is Ann Jimenez. I live up in Mesa Oaks at Lompoc. I want to voice my objections and concerns about the proposed Lompoc Valley Motorsports Park project at the Lompoc Airport. I do understand that there are some very significant benefits, certainly to our youth in the community. However, I do not feel it's at all appropriate to locate such a project in the city of Lompoc near residences, retail businesses, restaurants, and hotels. The Motorsports Park will bring extreme noise pollution to residents of Lompoc and surrounding areas in Vandenberg Village, Mesa Oaks, the Bluffs, homes near the airports, Albertsons, and many other nearby homes. My husband and I have lived near the Bluffs in Mesa Oaks for over 25 years, and we can hear the Lompoc High School band practice and sometimes noise from the roads below us from the airport. That noise is seldom, but it does show that sound carries, and the anticipated noise from the Motorsports Park will far exceed band and traffic noise. We live in Lompoc and specifically in Mesa Oaks because of the peace and tranquility. The noise from the Motorsports Park will invade our lives and homes and ruin our peace and quiet. We spend our weekends outdoors in our yard and enjoy the quiet. We sit around outside in the evenings, although not too often because of the weather, and again enjoy the sounds of nature and peacefulness. Hundreds of people living anywhere within several miles of the park will be impacted by the noise. And for a long time, so not just for a minute here, a minute there. I understand there is a possible positive economic impact from the park and an entertainment value to a select group of people. I do not feel it is fair or responsible to impose hardship on the many who have chosen to live here because of the peace and quiet. People have already bought their homes and live where they do because of location and quality of life. To build a very noisy motorsports park is to introduce something extremely different and change the quality of life to existing residents. Property values will also decline, and the intrusion of car racing noise in both daylight and evening hours. People enjoy their homes during the daytime as well as evenings and weekends. There is no time that's acceptable to impose constant noise and interference into local residents' lives. The inclusion of a car race track inside a town is also not a positive addition to the impression the town makes on visitors or potential home buyers or businesses. It's loud and has a generally negative image. I believe most cities do not allow them within city limits for that reason, and certainly not near residential areas. We should learn from the cities that have not allowed them or have removed them from so close to town and residences. I understand that some want to race their cars, but I strongly object to it at the expense of all the residents who already live in the area and will be negatively impacted by the noise and the light pollution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ron Fink. I live in the city of Lompoc, and I wasn't going to talk on this subject, but since I'm here, I will anyway. At this point in time, I don't either support or object to this project. We simply don't have enough information. All of the concerns of the people who are objecting to the project should be answered in the environmental impact report as it goes forward. And the people will have an opportunity to comment on all of these things that they're bringing up. At this point, we don't know how much noise is going to be created. We don't know how much dust is going to be created. We don't know what's down in the riverbed. George says there's a lot of concrete and rebar down there. Well, okay, there probably is. And I know full well there was a lot of trucks running up and down through there, so maybe all the critters got squashed. Who knows? But we don't know yet. And the point is that, as Ms. Palladino said earlier, we really don't have enough information at this point to make a decision as the public to what to do about it. So we got to find out, and that's the point of the EIR. Thank you.
Next. No, Mary, you can't get a second time. Sorry, you got one.
I thought we could have 5 minutes.
No, we let everybody have 1 minute and they're done. Sorry. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Ruth McKenna. I just want to say that I've heard a couple of people say about the noise that may be created once we get the track and people are out there racing. And I just want to say there's airplanes. I mean, was it Dave who's got the airplane? Yeah. Out there. And so, I mean, he's got his planes going like every weekend. I mean, I enjoy watching them, and I wish I was up there with him sometimes, up there in the airplane. But anyway, my point is that with the airplanes going and coming and everything, I feel with the motorcycles that are going to be out there, and the guy that was up here earlier saying about, you know, the mufflers being on the airplanes and tractors and whatnot, I mean, just traffic in general going by. I just feel that with our little motorcycles and people that are going to be out there racing, I feel that it's not going to be that much of a difference, I feel. And as far as like the lady that was up here a little while ago stating about Mesa Oaks, I mean, I don't live very far from Lompoc High, and I mean, I really don't hear the band practicing that much, especially if you're inside. But even if you're outside, I don't feel like they're that loud. And so I hope we can move this forward and get along and all agree, and let's get racing.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council. My name is Gordon Keebler. I've lived here 50 years, and I work at O'Reilly Auto Parts. There are a lot of kids that come in there looking for high-performance parts for their car. There's still a lot of street racing that goes on in this town. Even up by Mesa Oaks, they do a lot of street racing up there. I know a lot of these 19 and 20-year-old import guys that have these cars that are still racing in this town every weekend. We don't hear it. We don't hear the noise. The money that this will bring in, it'll get these import guys and a lot of these other guys a place to race where we can make money and be safe. It's just, how long is this going to take to do, to get these kids off the street and get them a place to go? If it takes 2 or 3 years, it'll never stop. It'll never get started. It's just, I'd like to see it move forward quicker than 4 or 5 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Okay, you guys all came down here. If you don't say your piece now, it's not going to happen. Going once, going twice. Closed for oral communication. I think I want to talk a little bit about noise because, as it's been pointed out, there are more questions than answers. So I want to just provide some information. First, with regard to motorcycles that would use this facility, because this facility is paid for with money from a state parks grant, and the state parks grant is paid for with money from green stickers. And for those of you who don't have motorcycles, a green sticker is like a license plate for off-road. And if you have a green sticker on your motorcycle, it can't be modified. And one of the things that we put in the rules for the kids' moto park when we passed that was that motorcycles couldn't run there that were modified. So for a motorcycle to run, they have to be original, and they have to have the original legal exhaust, or they won't be allowed in the park, because the park is paid for with green sticker money. And the operating funds that the committee currently uses for the kids' moto park are also green sticker money, and the operating funds they will use for this park will be green sticker money. There's also some concern, and people have asked me about noise. So today I made one more phone call, and I talked to the folks at the Irwindale Raceway, who I talked to a while back before we started down this road. And I said, I know there's concern in the community about noise, and I want you to tell me about noise at your place. And he said, well, realize first, you can't run here if you don't have a muffler. And they're an 8th mile track. Now, most of the things you see on TV are quarter-mile racing, and those are completely different types of cars. Those are top fuel or nitrous or alcohol or all those things, and they run open exhaust, which means there's nothing between the engine and the end of the tailpipe, which is usually as close as you can get it to the engine. So you hear the full sound of the combustion, and that's very low frequency sound, which is why it travels quite a ways. What the committee has is they have a sanctioning letter from the International Hot Rod Association. And the International Hot Rod Association is not NHRA, who runs all of the big events. It's more of what they call sportsman racing. So it's average people, like everybody sitting in this room, who take their car out there and run it and probably do a little bit of work on it. But again, you have to have an exhaust. And it's 1/8 mile, which according to the guy at Irwindale means that the run is about 10 seconds. And the top speed for the average car is right in the vicinity of 80 miles an hour, and for your mom mobile that you take out there, it's more like 60. He also said that they require exhaust, and with any of these tracks, there's a safety inspection that the car has to receive before it can run, and one of the checkoffs is that it has the exhaust on it. They run 5 hours of racing on, I think it was Thursday nights, Thursday afternoon, evening, beginning at 5 o'clock, and on average, the amount of racing time where somebody's flying down the track making noise is 8 minutes per hour. So in 5 hours, there's 40 minutes of muffled noise of cars accelerating hard, probably not too much different than standing next to a freeway on-ramp when one of you leadfoots gets on it. The reason that the airport was actually looked at for this way back when we were looking at a lot of places was that there's an existing noise overlay for the airport because of the noisy operations. And Mr. Hughes' plane flies right over where I live now pretty much every afternoon and all day Saturday and Sunday, and it's louder than his old plane. Now, my wife thinks it's great, and I think it's noisy, and, we went on with life. So just to kind of explain how close people are, I did some measurements. So up the hill, across the airport, through the industrial park, and across Central Avenue, houses are 2,100 feet away. Across the valley and up the hill, the closest house up on the point is 9/10 of a mile away. And the houses up in the village are 1.6 miles away, and the houses in Mesa Oaks, I didn't measure it, but they would probably be about 1.1 miles away. So again, this location was picked out because there wasn't anybody close and there was already a noisy airport. Additionally, beginning in January, the EVOC track at the college will be having cars running around it at 110 miles an hour, and it won't be for 10 seconds. They'll be out there going around the track, getting some mileage in. So that's why this site was selected, just for those of you who think nobody thought about this, there was a lot of thought that went into it. I think that's most of what I know on noise. There's a lot of discussion about the environmental side of this, and sorry, I didn't make an invitation and an introduction earlier, so I want to do that, and I want to ask a question. We have our friend Sixto Fernandez from State Parks out here who really held our hand, mine, Teresa's, and the whole committee, and we owe a great deal of thanks to for helping us with the grant. Sixto, would you come down, please? And maybe you could kind of enlighten us on the green sticker and exhaust and what that means if I didn't inform people correctly.
No, I think you did a good job. Good evening, Mayor and council members, public. My name is Sixto Fernandez. I'm with the California State Parks. I am the OHP division. I'm the grants manager. And congratulations on a successful application. Teresa did a great job with the mayor and a lot of staff work, so good job. I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Anything in particular?
So would you characterize the noise from a green sticker bike with legal exhaust?
I know it has to meet certain decibel points, and I believe it's 86 and below, and that it has to be, it's a requirement, and that's going to be monitored as long as there's grant funds available. So. And
that's monitored both with the inspection and also with the DV meter?
Correct.
Okay. And then there's a lot of discussion about the environmental side of it, and I lost it. TMI, TRA. We received a brochure from them that the committee passed out. Have you used them in your organization in the past?
Yes. TRA is a private entity that has a contract with the OHP division to do environmental consultant work for us. They've been with us for over 10 years. I don't know the exact amount of years, but this is one of their expertise is off-highway motor vehicle type projects. So they do work for us all across California. So.
And I need to ask this question, although I think that if they keep doing it for 10 years, it probably means that they're doing a good job for you, but are they doing a good job for you?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Who else has a question? Councilmember Costa.
No questions for the speaker.
Okay. Councilmember Lingle, you reaching for your button?
So, Mr. Fernandez? If you have used this environmental group for your EIRs, they meet all of your qualifications, because one of the things is we're doing the environmental study because it's required for this grant.
That's correct.
Okay. They meet all of your qualifications, they always have?
Yes, they do. And again, that's one of their expertise is this type of project. So again, they've done many projects for us throughout California.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Hey, thank you very much for the hours and all those phone calls on the weekend.
Good luck.
Well, can't we?
Okay. Who wants to talk about something next? Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. There was a couple concerns in the public that I wanted to address. First and foremost, I understand the concern of lack of information, and I just wanted to offer up a few things. I know sometimes it's difficult to find, but just for future reference, anybody who's asking, if you go on the city's website, you have to find the city council agenda, then you have to find the agenda item. And under the staff report, there was attachments that included project maps for you to review. If you ever have any questions about that, always feel free to call the city staff. They're more than welcome. The city clerk especially can provide you with that information directly if you have any questions in the future. And I think what I can say is if you have any general questions, feel free to talk to Carl, who was up front and speaking, because I know he's always willing to be an ambassador, of course, for the project. And so I reference people to him frequently. So I just wanted to mention that. The next thing I wanted to mention was there was a question of why we would be requiring this organization to go out to an RFP, but we wouldn't be requiring a developer to do that. If I could just have the city attorney clarify that concern for us.
There are times when we require an RFP, even if it's a developer, depending upon the nature and the size of the project. So sometimes we do and sometimes we don't.
How is that designation made?
Basically, if the level of impacts, the level of errors, to do an environmental impact report, there's various subject matter that you have to analyze on whether or not there's going to be what's called significant environmental impacts. And what you first do is something called an initial study, and that tells you how many of those areas you're going to have to do it, the EIR is going to have to cover. Depending on the number of subject matters that have to be analyzed, that's a pretty major project if there's a lot of those subject matters. So the cost for that could be rather expensive. So unless the staff already knows that there's an EIR consultant who has done that exact number of, or most of that number of subjects, it makes sense to go out for an RFP, and they did it satisfactorily. It makes sense to go out for an RFP because you then are sure you're going to get someone who has the background and analysis and capability of doing all those projects, and it becomes a competitive bid, so to speak, because then people know that there's going to be other people proposing, so they're going to sort of lower their costs so that they get the job.
Thank you. Two other quick things. The reason why I approved this project in the first place is because I think that there is some amazing potential here, or to go forward with the project. But unfortunately, right now, we are just running on anecdotal information. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you bringing forward the gentleman from the state parks, because prior to that, all the information you were providing was anecdotal. And so people take it at face value, which is understandable, but the reality is we don't have the information at this time as to whether or not it's going to be really loud or whether or not it can be mitigated. And that's why I'm in favor of continuing, because this environmental impact report will allow us to gather the data, analyze this, mitigate the issues as we see fit. So that's kind of the next step, and we'll be gathering the information once the report is complete. I do have one final question for Ms. Breeze, perhaps. Again, I want to clarify this. What we're discussing today is only for the off-highway vehicle portion of the project.
No, the environmental impact report is required to cover the entire project. The grant portion only will cover the off-highway vehicle portion, but the project is the entire, the drag strip and the off-highway vehicle.
Perfect. So yeah, but what I meant was the grant portion, which would be the off-highway vehicle portion.
Correct, yes.
But I only say that because the TRA Environmental Sciences, I'm sure they look great, they sound great. Their experiences with off-highway vehicles, I'm not sure if their experiences with drag strips and the remaining portion of the project. So the scope of work is larger than just the off-highway vehicle portion, and for that reason, I'm going to be in favor of an RFP with some working together. We have to figure out how to combine our efforts in the selection process. Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Breeze, what we're being asked to approve tonight is phases 1 through 6. No.
This MOU covers phase 1, which is the environmental portion.
Yeah. Okay, so we're only approving, that's good, because Mr. Fink made a good point. The information is not available to improve the entire project right now.
No, that is correct. Until we have the environmental information and that data has been completely vetted with all of the other resource agencies, then we will have scoping meetings during the environmental review process to allow the public to look at the project as it's proposed and to give input on what they believe are important factors, the noise, the traffic, anything of that manner. And then as these studies are prepared, we coordinate with other regulatory agencies who have specific requirements. At that point, When the document is ready, as with all of our EIRs, we bring it to the council, and the council then looks at it and will certify it. If there's impacts that need to be mitigated, the whole purpose of CEQA is for disclosure, to provide the decision makers with the information. If there's the ability to, even though there are impacts that may not be able to be mitigated, the council can make a statement of overriding considerations because of the value of the project for the community. But the important part is all of the information is brought forward for the public and the decision makers to have when they're making a decision.
Okay, good. So I'm hoping that the public understood what Ms. Breeze just said, that the information you will be able to have you will have many opportunities to still talk about this project before it actually gets developed. Once we have the environmental impact report completed, we'll have meetings for the public to come to attend to address your concerns. So we're not approving the entire project tonight. Thank you, Ms. Breeze.
Councilmember Lingle, if I may add, you actually legally cannot commit to the entire project until that EIR is done, because that's the fundamental first step. And the beauty of the grant that you received is the portion of the money from the grant that's going to be used for the EIR can be spent, and even if the project doesn't go forward, the city doesn't have to worry about paying that part of the grant back, which isn't true for the rest of the money. If the rest of the money starts to get spent and then for some reason the project doesn't go forward, the city would have to spend that money or pay that money back. So it's another good reason why we have all the impacts in front of you, so that you know what the impacts are and know what the ultimate cost would be and what the impacts would be before you make the commitment to go forward.
Thank you for adding that. Mr. Mayor, if I just can make a couple other points.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm also in agreement with Councilmember Costa that the environmental probably is just qualified, or maybe that's their specialty, is in the off-road portion of it. But they will have an opportunity, if we go out for an RFP, they will have an opportunity to apply for the entire project as well. So hopefully they will put in their proposal or their bid for the entire project, if that's the way we decide to go. A couple of the comments, let's see. The dump fees, or the cleanup. I'd like us to discuss that a little bit, because I understand from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of debris out there that this group will be cleaning up on city property. So I'm thinking, okay, since it is a mutual project, they're going to be doing work for us, maybe we can waive the dump fees and give them a little break on that. I'd certainly be in favor of discussing that a little bit. And then the access. What if we considered allowing them to have access to the property until or unless we start receiving complaints from the other tenants? If the other tenants in the property, because that seems to be what we're concerned about, the other tenants maybe being interfered with. So maybe we consider giving the group access to the property, give them a key to the gate or whatever they need, unless we start getting complaints from the other tenants. And then we say, either satisfy the other tenants around there or give us a key back. I mean, it's one possibility we may want to consider.
Councilmember Lingle, I have a question for you. Would that be prior to the signing of the MOU or once the MOU is actually signed?
I think it'd be prior to the MOU, unless we get complaints.
Well, we should, let me step in. Assuming we approve the MOU tonight, it would be signed immediately. So, and they would need to have insurance before they got a key to go on the property.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Councilman Brown.
Yeah, many things that Bob came up with, I agree with. One is that I also felt on the trash cleanup that was left there by another contractor, the city of Lompoc hasn't done anything about it. So if they clean it up, then they should have the right to go ahead and dump it up at the landfill. And we need to look at that issue. I think to work on the access so they can get in there. I'm not saying they can have full reign to it, but there needs to be some kind of working relationship that they can get on there to show people around until they have full use of it. One gentleman talked about racing cars and everything else. Nobody talked about the boat racing that used to come out of Lompoc. We used to travel over the United States, some of the fastest boats in the sky, racing boats, and it was some excellent stuff. So we've had all kinds of racing material come out of Lompoc. We do need more information, and that's why I think the RFP is needed, because you can look at that quality. We do it ourselves on other projects, other people do the same thing. By having enough people look at, but I think the organization should also look in and has some type of work within selection of that RFP. But the RFP, if it's done right, will hit all the areas that we're going to need to hit and pick that all up. And like I say, George left already, but George said the airport was so slow at one time that he wanted to have car races on the airport on Sunday, but he never got the permit to do it. So, marching band, I've heard the marching band at Lompoc clear up Magnetic Canyon, so I think that's an issue that really doesn't stand too far, because it's everywhere. But there's one thing I'd like to ask the committee, and also it'd be interesting to do as we get more information out, is to get some of these automobiles or cars or whatever's going to be racing down there, take them down there someday and put them on a deal and let them go ahead and run on a bear canal, so see what that noise is like, so people can understand what's going on. We got motorcycles in this town that'll blow your head off. I got them going by my house all the time. You know, the muffler on them is terrible. There is no muffler on them. You know, it's a straight pipe. That you used to get tickets when I was driving high school. You had a straight pipe on your car. You got a ticket and hauled in. So I think that we have those happening now in town. But I really think that by setting it up and have the right RFP and the right people doing it, it's going to hit all those areas, and we need them all listed out there. The noise is going to be an issue. It always will be. But if we can find a way just how much of an issue it really is, then it'd be some way to find that out. Even if we had to go down south and record it from down there from different distance than the racetrack you have. So that people will understand what that amount of noise can be. And the people are concerned in their areas on noise. But I can go along with the project and the way it's said, but I'll support an RFP for getting in the right person to do the right people, the right organization to do the best job.
You're next.
I'm going to lose the RFP war, but it probably has its good side to it in the fact that you will receive multiple bids, and maybe somebody will pop out that is a little less money for you. You do have the call, though, still, and a say, correct? On choosing who does this? I want to make sure that the committee is aware that they have a say on who gets chosen.
Yes, as Ms. Breeze stated, that the developer or the committee would be consulted on the consultant that would be recommended.
Yeah. The other thing, our property, our mess, our trash, I certainly could concur with us having something waived in the way of cleaning it up because it's an existing mess. It's almost like you can mitigate the bank washing on the river by putting the concrete on the other side, but that's probably some curse word in the environmental world. General liability insurance, I think we've all agreed that the 1 million, vice the 3 through the phases is going to happen. And I wanted to add an item 4 onto my little list here of obviously access to the site. We have a tenant, but I'm sure the tenant's not paying on the 40 acres. The tenant's just using the 40 acres. So I feel in the world of entitled access down there that the motorsports crew has as much access as the skydive people do. I mean, you got to show your property. So, I mean, those are the 4 things that I'd like to see happen with it.
Did you get your say in, Bob? Okay. Yeah, we probably, are you back?
You can go first.
Me first? You first. Ladies first.
You have the gavel.
No, ladies first.
Okay. This is sort of a just a random thought, is there any way to utilize impact fees to pay for the removal of debris and trash from the property? Is there any, for some reason, that's the only thing I was thinking of potential funding, but I don't think you can, but it is new development technically, so I wasn't sure if that was the case. Just a question.
Councilmember Costa and rest of the council, to answer that question, the impact fees would have to be building something new. So if we were, more importantly though, if you step back, the solid waste is a utility. It is a fee-based utility. Part of it is Prop 218 based with the cost of service requirement. Part of it is landfill, which is a fee-based. Were the council to waive those fees, the utility would have to get paid. So if it's debris that's on the airport would probably have to pay those fees. So it's either the airport paying the solid waste for those fees. We can't just say solid waste is not going to get compensated for that added value that's brought into the facility. So, and I think you answered your own question about impact fees. That I just can't see how that would be a legitimate use of impact fees.
But that was part of the reason why I wanted to come up, because I wanted to get that discussion started, because it is a cost recovery essentially. It would essentially be the airport or the project. One or those would be the only two.
Or the general fund. The general fund could pay for it as well. Just solid waste cannot. That's all.
We did also have one other proposal that we approach the state grant and look at reallocating some of, or rebudgeting some of those funds to cover those costs. So that would be another alternative.
And that would work.
Just a quick question, motorsports guys, is there a way you can incorporate that stuff into the park? I mean, obviously not rebar, but lumps of concrete for fill for mounds and things. Is there any way it could be used on site?
You got to go to the microphone.
A couple things I want to respond to. First, in regards to the environmentalist, I don't pretend to be an environmentalist or no, but and you folks just received the prospectus for the environmental consultant, but I looked through it, and in my way of thinking, they can handle just about any aspect of this project. They've done noise studies for Caltrans, for highways. I mean, noise is an issue. They can do the noise study. So what would be something they couldn't handle? They've dealt with CEQA. They've dealt with Fish and Game. They've done endangered species studies. I think they're capable. So in regards to the access, if we were given access to the property, I see no reason that we can't work with David Hughes. I mean, we've talked with him. He's been at our committee meetings over the years. We can have a working relationship with him. We don't mean to endanger his business or his access. We're big kids. I think we can play in the same playground together. In regards to the dump fees, and the gentleman made the statement that the dump has to be paid regardless. Well, my understanding is there's a free dump day where they come around and pick up everything on that one day, and it's free. So why would that not be applicable to something like this? I mean,
we usually can't take free things from ourselves, but I have a thought that I'll add when you're done.
Okay. The final thing I wanted to say was that I appreciate all the people that came here. When I thanked everybody earlier, I didn't make it clear that we have people from out of town. We have people that are interested in this project, and I think that means something. It should mean something to the council and to the city. People from Camarillo are here. People from Ventura. We have a gentleman from Newberry Park. It's obvious, and Santa Maria. and then Sixto coming all the way from Sacramento to be with us. It's a big deal. This is a project that could do a lot of good for the community. I think the people coming here and giving of their time, I want to thank you all for being here. It's a big deal. So thanks for coming all this way and showing your support. Thank you.
Councilmember Lingle?
Carl, before you step away, we did get the information on the TRA environmental, and it looks like they probably can cover everything. So just solve my curiosity. Why are you opposed to going out with an EIR? I mean, for an RFP on the EIR? If they can do it, and I'm assuming they are probably going to be less expensive. I mean,
that's a big factor, but I think it could be. But time and money, I think, is the big key to this. We can spend a lot of time on this RFP process, and I'd rather see that spent doing the study than wasting the time trying to pick a person, plus all the time and expense.
Yeah, I can understand the time, but it looks like if they are less expensive and they can meet all the criteria, it looks like they'd rise to the top of the list anyway, so maybe it's not a big issue.
Then again, it's still staff time and time to do the process.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure, but my guess is that process could take, 60 days or more?
The process would take approximately 3 months.
2 months? Yeah.
2 to 3 months.
2 to 3 months. So, to me, that's substantial. We've been working on this for 3 years, and 3 months just to pick the person, to me, sounds excessive.
Carl, would you share with us, because you guys have to pay half the bill on all this, how much have you guys raised over time, just so everybody understands how much work you put into fundraising?
We've spent a lot of time fundraising, and we've raised a little over $60,000.
Okay. And some of that obviously has been spent on...
Oh, yeah, we've spent quite a bit to promote the project, to pay for the consultant, to put on events. So, and there's ongoing expenses all the time, as the city knows.
Yes, thank you. Okay, my bite. Go ahead and have a seat.
Well, I just wanted to share that also before we can start the EIR, there is the matching funds that would need to be available, so the RFP process could be taking place while those remaining funds would be fundraised.
So that means there's currently a fund balance of $60,000. They have to get up to $252,000 by the time that we actually hire the consultant?
No, they would pay half of whatever the consultant is.
Which, based on current estimates, would be approximately that amount?
Estimates vary rather widely. Yeah, go ahead.
The estimate that we put into the grant was a very, very rough estimate, and it was not something that was highly refined. That's what the RFP process would definitely do. The consultants bidding on the project would sharpen their pencils and would come in with their best price, and that way we would hopefully come in with a price that would be less than our just off-the-cuff type estimate.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say that there's a lot of people looking at this project that I think would consider donating a lot of money, but they're waiting to see what the city does and how the city handles this project. If we were to get a signed MOU and start moving forward with the environmental process, I'm convinced that people will step up and start helping us in larger chunks of money. And that's what we've been waiting for this. To get this MOU signed and get moving forward is the key to this project happening. So.
And I kind of agree about, 5 months ago, a guy called up and said we'd be interested in, how'd that go? I'd be interested in donating some money to the project. And one of the committee members, Carl was out of town, Will was out of town. He called me up and said, hey, can you come over and talk to this guy? And we were thinking this was, maybe a $500 deal, which is a lot of money. So I drove over to the airport and we met with him, and we couldn't get on the site because nobody had a key to the gate. And we stood out there outside. You were there, weren't you, Ed? I don't remember who was standing there with me. Well, at the end of the day, he wrote us a check for $6,000. He finished off the matching that we were working on, which amazed me. But just looking through TRA's qualifications briefly while we were sitting here, they've done way more than motorcycle parks. I mean, they've done the Pismo Dunes, those vehicle recreation area, which is trucks and cars and everything else. And just they have an extensive list of projects. So I guess I don't have any fear that they would be able to do a drag strip, because that's really the easy part of it, I think. The environmental part is the hard part, and the drag strip's kind of the easy part. So far, it took us a little over 4 months to write an MOU from the time the grant was awarded. It would take us another 3 months, perhaps, to get an RFP out. It's clear to me that since the committee brought this brochure to us, that's the one they would be interested in. And a long time ago, when we were working on estimates for the grant, because they had done work for state parks, I had an occasion to call them, and they kind of, in just that ballpark estimate, their number was 70 to 100,000, in that range, thinking it would probably be toward the lower end. So I was pretty surprised when the other estimate came in at 200,000. It's clear to me that the committee wants them, and they appear to be qualified, and I can't think of a single reason not to just move forward. They do work for state parks now. They're familiar with the grant process. They have a working relationship with both state and federal fish and game, which is golden. And more importantly, they're familiar with putting in projects in habitat areas and how to deal with that. And that's the next number one concern here, is that we're good stewards of the environment, and we mitigate whatever we need to mitigate. So I don't know if I can talk one more of you into it, but I really would love to select them this evening as the consultant for this project, and we could save 3 months and a couple $1,000 worth of city staff time, half of which the committee would be forced to pay for, and half of which the grant would pay for. I think we've kind of got the insurance put to sleep that it would be $1 million through phases 1 through 6, and that would be a small change in the 1 through 6, because 1 through 6 are the construction phases. Phase 7 would be the operations phase.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I believe it's 1 through 3 is the development part. Phase 4 has an operational part as well. So the $1 million would cover from phases 1 through 3, and then we'd need to have the discussion the discussion is going to happen earlier than what I'm saying, because this MOU only covers phase 1.
Okay, so I guess maybe I need to phrase it differently, because I don't want to go all the way up the road and then kill this project when we're halfway into it by an insurance requirement. So I guess the way I would choose to phrase it is that the insurance coverage would be $1 million for all the construction phases.
Mr. Mayor, Phase 4 reads the off-road portions would be dirt and could be operational after basic layouts were approved. That starts in Phase 4.
Correct, and that would require a separate insurance policy for operation, and that amount would need to be determined separately. But and one of the things I would say is we can want any amount of insurance we want, but these industries are very selective. So in the construction industry, everybody has $1 million coverage, and if we want contractors to come and give their time and effort for free, they're not going to have more than $1 million. And if we make it $3 million, they're not going to come, and we're not going to get it built. It's that simple. It was the same problem we had with regard to the BMX park, and it's the same problem we had with regard to building the little kids park. We simply,
Mr. Mayor,
no one has it.
The way that the MOU is written, as we sit here, that's exactly what it says. It's $1 million for the development phase. For the development phases, it's $1 million. And for the operational phase, the way it's currently written is it would be an amount as directed by the city's insurer. If you'd rather not have the city insurer being the determiner, we could have that say, the insurance shall be provided in an amount reasonably directed by the city.
Okay. Development, to me, is the process we go through for the MOU, the environmental review, and all of those things. Development is not construction. Now, maybe development to you means construction, but to all the rest of us it doesn't. So if you want to change the word to development and construction phases, then I'm all good with that.
The discussion we're having right now is on page 3 of Exhibit C. It's the paragraph that says insurance, and what's being suggested is rather than it saying during the development phase, it's say during the development and construction phases of the motorsports project. I don't have a legal objection to that.
Yep. And I actually went further and I put an arrow in and project, and I put in except operations after motorsports project except operations so that it was crystal clear. And those are the changes I'd recommend in that line to get these things done. Page 3, item F, insurance, first sentence. No, it's the MOU.
I'm sorry, Mayor, can you please recap the suggestions that you
during the development and construction phases, so add an S, of the motorsports park, LVPFA, blah, 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 shall provide $1 million. And that would get that off the table for me.
It's what the intent of the sentence was to begin with.
Good. Then we don't have any argument. I love that. With regard to the dump fees, a while back I actually went down there and spent a couple, 3 hours driving and walking around looking at what was there because I was concerned. And I identified 3 things. Number 1, there's industrial residue, which is largely concrete, and it's largely large concrete. Number 2, there was trash that had been hauled off from the airport because I recognized some of it, and it was a convenient place to dump it. And number 3, there was illegal dumping. There's a fairly substantial amount of wood down there, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to have a bonfire for an event one time, right? Yep, bonfire. The green waste and that sort of thing, if you separated and took it to the dump, green waste is $5 a truckload, so that'd be pretty economical to get rid of. And as for the concrete, just sitting here, when someone said, is there an alternative, and I don't know if this would be a good alternative, but and I believe the city should pay for these things because you guys didn't dump it there. You're going to have a lot of road base for the road in that would have to be imported. And I'm wondering if it would be cheaper to have someone bring in their crusher, and if you guys got all the concrete in one heap, which would be a lot easier than hauling it out, get a crusher in there and just have them crush it and leave the pile in place as a stockpile to do the project once construction begins. So I think we should investigate, y'all should investigate that on behalf of the city, and that might mitigate some of these costs. But at the end of the day, whatever the disposal is or the process needs to be a city expense.
Mayor Lynn, I don't necessarily disagree. I'm just curious where you see the funds coming from.
I would say it's either the airport's responsibility or the general fund's responsibility.
Do we have an estimated cost for that at this time?
One of the things that the committee wants to do is get access to the site so they could work on an estimated cost and look for solutions, but they haven't been able to get on the site to do those estimates.
We don't have an estimated cost at this time, but through the EIR process, we probably would learn a whole lot more about what needs to be taken off the property. So really, the cleanup and the fees associated with that could be addressed in a later phase of this as well.
I just want to make it clear at the get-go that we do not expect them to pay for it. We'll figure out a way. That's okay. We'll have a vote on it in a minute.
You're wanting a vote on it this evening, even though we'll address it later in the future, or?
I don't want to kick the can down the road on issues that can kill the deal.
Well, it's difficult to make a decision without all the information. I don't believe we have adequate information to make that determination this evening.
we'll see what the council wants to do. So let me go through a couple of changes that I see in the EIR. Number one and I know the intent is, but I'm sorry, the MOU. On page 3 at the top, the airport master plan, this would lead you to believe that the Motorsports Committee is going to be responsible for paying for this change to the airport master plan. I know the intent is that the state parks grant would pay for half of it and they would pay for half of it. So I want to add some wording there so that's clear. It's on page 3 at the very top on LVPR, et cetera, responsibilities. Airport master plan shall be solely responsible for the cost of preparation, processing.
Page 3 of the MOU or page 3 of one of the exhibits?
The memorandum of understanding, page 2 at the top, airport master plan. I'm sorry, I said page 3, my bad. So it says that the committee shall be solely responsible for the cost of preparation and processing of any changes to the airport master plan. That is not in fact the case. They shall be responsible for half and the grant shall be responsible for half, because everything in this is a 50-50 deal. So I would change the first sentence to read for half of the cost and the state grant half of the cost.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd just like to point out that right now it isn't allocated in the grant. However, we can approach the state with that language and that change in the budget.
And just to further clarify, I don't think there's even going to be a cost, because the airport consultant indicated when we had the airport meeting that he would probably be willing to make those changes at no cost to us, but I don't want to go down the road where it isn't fully delineated in here.
And we also could consider adding language that the city and the foundation would work together to seek outside funding to cover any costs in updating the lamp.
So I don't know how we want to do this. We want to take it one question at a time, or how we want to go forward?
I don't know either, but I don't know what the direction is right now for that item, because...
Okay, let's just take it one bite at a time. So the first question we're going to decide on is the airport master plan, and my proposal that the cost be divided half between the committee and half between the state grant or another funding source. And let's just go from one end to the other on a yes-no basis. Bob?
And if another funding source isn't available,
then it becomes a responsibility of the city.
Mr. Mayor, I can't agree to that because I don't have the information. I don't know how much it's going to cost. I don't know if the grant is even willing to consider this. I mean, I just don't have the information to make that decision, so I can't agree to it.
Okay, let's try that out. Sixto? Are you still out there?
Come on up.
You got to come up. Sorry. Not asking for a commitment.
Okay.
But would this type of fee be something that typically could be paid for through the grant?
Yes. Now, understanding that this is a two-phase project, the EIR is the first phase, and that has to be completed and approved prior to any second phase being approved. So.
Right. Okay, there's your answer, Bob. Does it work for you now?
I totally respect the gentleman, but until I saw something from the grant organization that said you can spend the money, I can't recommend to you to say, go ahead and say you'll spend, unless the council wants to do that, which is fine. It's just, if the grant doesn't cover it, who's going to cover it? If the city wants to cover it, that's fine. It's your decision, but we need to just make that clear.
Yep.
Mayor, I wanted to clarify, when this project came forward, we wanted this to be a partnership, but by no means did we commit ourselves to paying half of certain documentations or portions of the project. So what we're doing is essentially committing ourselves to half the cost of, and again, maybe there isn't a cost, maybe the grant will cover it, but when we're considering the protection of the city in worst case scenario, we're now committing to half of the cost of any changes or updates to the airport master plan with that language that you're suggesting.
Okay, do you have a better language?
I mean, if there's language to indicate specific to the grant, that would be, in the case that the grant approval is provided, that yes, it would be the half grant portion and half of the organization, PRPF. It's a little long.
Just going to say LV from now on.
And if not, then it's as stated, which is that they are solely responsible for the cost and preparation and processing of any necessary changes.
And another consideration the council needs to keep in mind is if you spend some of the grant money on this, then you won't have that amount of grant money to spend on some other part of the project.
There is always that risk, yes. Thanks, Sixto. Okay, my question back to you, Councilmember Costa. What wording do you prefer?
It depends on the goal that you are trying to achieve.
My goal is to get half of the money from the grant on everything in here, which is how we started out this conversation with the organization, that the grant would pay for half and they would pay for half. And I don't want to go sideways from that if we can avoid it.
Perhaps a compromise is the language that your interim city administrator suggested, which was to have language added to that paragraph that says, and the parties will work together to find other funding sources to supply the money for that plan.
Okay. Councilmember Costa, that work for you?
Yes, it does, absolutely.
Bob?
So the other funding sources do not include the city then?
Not in that, the intent of the language that I understood the interim city administrator to be saying.
Correct.
Okay, then I agree.
Okay, Dirk?
I'll agree. It moves it forward and it gives us a chance later on to look for additional funds.
Dwayne?
I agree.
Okay, I'm in.
And Stacy had
I'm writing it in as I go. And Joe has a photographic memory and we have a video. Okay, you guys, cut that out. Quit picking on Joe. Okay, with regard to the next paragraph, the last sentence says, LV shall remain responsible for project progress, compliance with the design and construction agreement of the DCA and other performance requirements. And to that I would propose to add, except those contracts under the grant administered by the city, because I don't think they can be responsible for contracts we're going to issue under the grant. And the way it's worded now, they're responsible for everything. Anybody got any heartburn with that?
I just wanted to clarify that that section is about the foundation responsibilities, so that is the intent. If adding the clarifying language doesn't change the intent of that paragraph.
Good things. So let's go down the road. Bob?
I'm okay.
I'm fine.
I'm okay. Dwayne?
okay.
All right. Ashley?
Sure.
Okay. The next one is the next one is a question for the attorney, and this is in the last paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th sentence. Prior to the city entering into contracts with any outside consultants for any of the foregoing, LVPFA shall deposit those additional monies required to cover those costs. What's the any? Is it the things in this paragraph, or is it everything in every paragraph before this? And that's just because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what any of the foregoing means.
When I read the intent was of that paragraph.
I'm sorry?
My reading of it was the intent was of that paragraph.
Okay. Thank you. I'm quoting you. Okay. We solved the insurance. One of the things in here that, and it kind of set a bell off with me, I don't think the committee much noticed it, was in item D, the development process, the last sentence. building permits, fees, impact fees for the motorsports project. And all the rest of them I got, but when we got to impact fees, that kind of raised a question because the the street impact fee is suspended, but all of the other impact fees aren't. And I'm wondering what impact fees the city would typically pay if the city were doing this project without the foundation. And whoever wants to have that on the staff.
Trash containers, the rest of it's not relevant to building.
Yeah, I mean, would they pay a park impact fee when they're building a park, for instance? Because those are large, large fees.
The city isn't required to pay any of the impact fees. I'm not sure what the history has been on when the city has decided to pay impact fees and when not.
Okay. I guess the question might be of the council if we want to exempt them from a couple of impact fees on this, because based on the size of the project, like the park impact fee could be really big, and the park land improvement fee could be really big. Now, obviously, they need to pay the water impact fee and the trash impact fee because that pays for the trash can and the water meter and those things.
The impact fees are based upon the type of unit and dwelling that's being built, i.e. you're doing a track, it's per home, it's per hotel, there's meter sizes on things. These are how the impact fees are concerned. This project shouldn't develop any impact fee other than the fact they're going to have to buy their own garbage containers.
Well, it would, because it's a commercial project and it would fall under those requirements, which are lesser than a home, but there's still impact fees that would be assessed.
Well, they are not defined in our AB 1600 book at all then.
This would be stuck into one of those holes, and it would probably be stuck into the commercial or the hole, I would guess. I don't know. Joe?
Since it's most likely going to occur as part of phase 2, or phase 2, not phase 1, we could add language to that says impact fees as required by the city in future phases, and then you decide when we come back to you with the MOU amendments for phases 2 through 6 on what you want to charge.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Was the rest of the council okay with that?
Yeah. Bob?
Thank you for asking. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, at that time, we would need the information of what impact fees would be required, right, if any. I'm not sure, actually, where this would fall.
Yeah,
but I'd be interested
I'm
to
not
know.
either. But I'm just concerned that we don't create a problem for the future.
I agree, because those can be exorbitant, so we don't want them to incur that. Mr. Wilkie's present. I don't know, Mr. Wilkie, if you wanted to address the topic of discussion about impact fees that would be incurred by this project in the future.
Yes, the current impact fees are across several different categories. For a commercial and industrial development, which this would likely be because it's not residential, the park improvement fees, parkland, recreation center, library, bikeways are not applicable to commercial or industrial. So what is applicable, if a water meter is put in, then that would be applicable. If there is wastewater facilities, if there's a bathroom or other facilities that are put in, that would apply, but it doesn't, if there are none, that would not apply. Police facilities, fire facilities, and traffic signals would apply. And those amounts are based on the square footage of buildings, so that may not be very much, because it's not based on the square footage of the property. It's based on 1,000 square feet of building.
So, yeah, let's just leave it in there and then we're covered, but it doesn't sound like it's a big, we'll leave Joe's wording in there. Okay, on Exhibit D, in item number 2, the survey shall include at a minimum property lines, fence lines, site elevations, and Oh, man, I lost the wording. Kevin, or what's the phrase for when you survey from the air? You know, radio survey? No, to do topography. The point is, they have to do site elevations, and there's no way to go on the site and do them because it's overgrown with brush, and we don't want them to cut the brush, so I want them to be able to use what we actually already have. What do you call that?
Okay, so there are
Plane
two.
flies over and it shoots the...
Yeah, right. There's an aerial survey that can be done. It's plus or minus a foot accuracy.
Okay.
What you generally do with a site that has a lot of brush and cover is you send a surveyor in there to actually take elevations and with a survey rod, and they survey the site. You do that so you don't have a gross error in your elevations. For instance, in grading, you miss a big hole somewhere, and all of a sudden you're now $40,000 extra on your grading because you were assuming it was a flat and there's a big hole there. So this was written, that's what any developer would do. You send the surveyors out there, they have a machete and they hack their way in and they do their work. They're used to doing that. So.
In conversations with city staff previously, the discussion was that we didn't want anybody hacking anything until the environmental review was done, and that's why I'm concerned that we would be go in there and start cutting things, because we already said we didn't want anybody to cut anything. So I'm wondering if, for the purpose of this, you ran away, Kevin. For the purpose of submitting a development plan, which is like the very first step, if that aerial survey for contours would be adequate. Because it's like the first step going down this process.
It would be better than nothing, but realize that then you would need to spend the extra expense later to do a accurate field survey to base the construction off of.
Well, the radio survey we actually have in city databases. We wouldn't have to do anything.
Right. We have a partial aerial survey of the property, but it's partial and it doesn't cover the whole thing. And of course, we would hand that to the group. We already have given that to the group for their use. It doesn't cover the whole property. It is what it is.
And just based on your experience, if you actually sent a survey in there to survey 40 acres of dense brush, and knowing that there's a 6-foot mountain out there in the middle somewhere that shows up on the radio survey, what kind of money are we talking about as opposed to just working from the radio data?
Yeah, I wouldn't hazard a guess at that. Really, the designer, usually what happens is the designer says, I need specific survey in this area because that's important to the overall design. You wouldn't survey it by hand the whole 40 acres. He would say, I know I'm going to need to drain out in this area, so it's important to get accurate elevations in that area. Your engineer, your architect drives that scope that the surveyor will do. So that's why you need to have a professional working on the team.
No, I don't dispute the fact that it needs to be professionally done. I'm just concerned about going in there. I've tried to go on some of this property and it's impassable. That's kind of the problem. Okay. No. Aerial topography survey, that's what it was. You wouldn't be comfortable using that, is that what you're telling me?
If I was designing this project, no, I wouldn't use an aerial topo.
No, I mean for this is just for the first phase of the development plan to provide a site plan for it. This isn't for engineering drawings, this is like square one. So this is for the site plan to do the environmental work. Would it be adequate for that?
Conceptual design, I guess, is what we're talking about. Yeah, it's the
conceptual design.
Sure, it would be adequate for conceptual design.
All right.
Understanding that you'd have to spend more money later to do. Yeah.
In this phase, this is in phase one, we had put in the survey at the request of our discussions, and it sounds like if we can use a conceptual in phase one, then we would want to put this detailed site survey in a later phase because the architect will need that information in that level of detail, or the designer. Is that accurate?
Yes. Okay, everybody good with that? Bob?
Thanks for asking, yes.
Dirk?
I'll concur with Bob.
I'm in. Dwayne?
Okay.
All right. Ashley?
Do we know what phase that would go in?
It's within 60 days of the MOU.
No, I'm sorry, where we would put the on-ground site survey.
I'd like to confirm with Ms. Breeze, but I think that'd be phase 2. Is that accurate?
It may be, it depends on the architect and the designer when they would need that information. Because even while we're working on phase 1, they could be working on additional design, site design, towards the end of our phase 1, so.
So you'd recommend leaving it here?
Was this something specifically identified by the applicant that it was going to be a cost?
It's going to be a really big cost to go in there and do a survey at the beginning. The thinking was that after the environmental work, there's going to be some site clearing, and then it would be a lot easier to do this type of work. So if the aerial survey could be used for the first round, then by the time the environmental work's done and there's some site clearing, then you're going to have a better chance of surveying. Because I'm serious, that stuff is solid. You can't go through it, particularly on the eastern side of the site. The western side, you can go through it as long as you don't mind getting a little poison oak, because it's older. But the eastern side is pretty dense. There's coyote brush and willows in there.
Ms. Breeze, do you see a significant issue with transferring this to phase 2?
It's really the designer that is going to drive when they need to have that site survey specific information. So if it goes to phase 2, it may delay the development plan.
Is this a sequence of events, is that how they could occur after environmental review? There could be clearing of the site prior to the site survey?
That's correct. Once we have surveyed and the studies have been prepared and we have an accurate biological picture of what is on the site, and we know what the resource agencies will allow to be done, then there could be clearing done.
Thank you. So I'm okay.
Okay. The next one has to do with item 3. It says review comment regarding the development plan, and then the time is within 30 days after the submittal of the proposed development plan, and I would add, and any amended submissions, because it's probably not going to fly on the first one. So it would be the same. The city would have 30 days to comment on an amended submission. Just makes the time frame clear to everybody. And it gives the city another 30 days for an amended submission, which is what we had for the first round. Bob?
I'm fine.
Dirk?
Fine.
I'm in.
Okay.
All right. And then on item 6, this is consultation with the Federal Aviation Administration. Staff shall submit copies of the proposed development plan to the FAA. And it says within 5 days after submittal of the proposed development plan. I think it really needs to be within 5 days after the development plan is deemed complete by the city's planning manager. Because if we send a development plan to the FAA and then we amend it and we got them to approve it, now we're going to have to send it back again. And we want to be sure that the plan is complete before we send it out. And just the goal in all of these things is to do the things that are low cost or free at the front end before we start spending the state's money. And the FAA approval is one of those things. So we want to have a plan that's deemed complete by the city before we send it to the FAA for approval.
If I may,
realize that their approval is preliminary.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, is this development plan that you're talking about now the development plan that only has the aerial survey, or the upgraded development plan after there's a full on-the-ground survey?
This is the development plan in number 2 above, which would have the aerial survey unless the architect came in and said, I want something more.
Maybe I can ask Ms. Breeze to clarify for me. I understood this process that had been set up by the scheduled performance, that the development plan that we were anticipating coming in under 2 was actually going to be the development plan that carried through not only with the EIR, but through the DRB, the Design Review Board, and whatnot. So it was more detailed than what I'm now understanding would be the development plan that results from an aerial survey, because we don't have the detail that we need from an on-the-ground survey.
The information that is going to come forward in that initial development plan is going to be the basis for the EIR. So we need as much detail as we can get in that plan. And the reason that we were going to send it forward to the FAA was for their review as quickly as possible, so that we would have them on board with the proposal. Generally, in the initial 30-day review, we may ask for clarification. We don't redesign a project, so we would make sure that the submittal met all of our requirements, meaning the number and the types of plans and information that was presented, but we don't redesign projects that are submitted by applicants.
And I'd just like to get clarification on number 2, submittal of development plan. The discussion is that we would have an aerial for conceptual, but if needed, we would also do the site, more detailed site survey in that phase, first phase.
If needed.
And where are we going to put the more defined survey, and what plan is that going to be part of?
That would then be part of coming forward for your, in the next phase.
In phase 2.
Where in the scheduled performance were you anticipating that happening?
It would not happen until we went into phase 2. This scheduled performance basically would, review of the development plan would be under 11A, because then you would be looking at the Development Review Board for technical recommendations, so you would have to have...
Which was what prompted my question before. On the bottom of page 2, where it says review of development plan, what development plan is the DRB going to review? The development plan that they produced for the EIR, or something more specific?
It would be the more specific. If there were any information that came out of the EIR that required that would require some sort of a change to the development based on information from the environmental project.
So if I may, through the mayor, I think we should then add the place where we could put the more full survey. We could add another subparagraph under 11 that says, and we're going to get the more complete development plan that then will be reviewed by the DRB. Does that work, Lucille?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody comfortable with the attorney's recommendation? Bob? Third? Dwayne?
Yeah.
Okay. You'll create the wording. Okay. And then the last one is just some wordsmithing on number 9. The intent was that if the cost is $50,000 or less, they have 30 days to come up with their... there's confusion about what this means. So if we add the word if the full cost is $50,000 or less, which means the committee would have to come up with $25,000, they would have 30 days. And then if the full cost is $50,001 to $100,000 or less within 40 days, and if it's, because the way it is now, if it was less than 150,000, or less than 200,000, they have 150 days, and that's not what we intended, and I know that's not what they intended. So just add the, the bracketing in there. So 50,001 to 100, 100,001 to 150, 150,001 to 200, and it would say if the full cost. So in other words, they're half. They would be expected to pay half of those numbers.
Rather than say, I know it's a real nit, but rather than say 50,001, what you wanted to say is if it's over 50,000, but 100,000 or less.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody,
If I may ask staff, is that accurate that the 50,000 meant the total cost, so they'd only be coming up with 20,000, or was their
25.
cost, was that all relevant to their cost?
Could be written either way. If it is written so that the total cost is 50,000 or less than 50,000, they would need to come up with their portion of it.
and the intent from their part was that if they had to come up with 25 grand, they could do it in 30 days, and each number further up, they needed a little longer.
And it does clarify that that is the foundation's share.
Correct.
Right there.
So we're all good with the concept, and we'll let the city attorney wordsmith it to fit. Bob?
Yes.
Dirk?
Yes.
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 Okay, so the only unresolved question at this point would be with regard to the consultant and whether we want to go out for an RFP or we want to accept the consultant that the committee has recommended and that State Parks traditionally uses for their project over the last 10 years. And I would just like to save 30 days and a couple $1,000 for going out for an RFP and take this consultant who has very, very substantial credentials, and in conversations with them in the past, they were very helpful to understand what needed to be done, and they also quoted a more affordable number by a substantial amount. I know there's some disconnect on that, so I'd just like everybody to say their piece. Yeah, your turn, Dirk.
The only thing I'm going to say about it is I agree that I would like them to be able to get that consultant, but in the sake of competition, I would like to see at least somebody bid against them, just to try and keep the cost.
Dwayne?
I agree with him on that too, is that there's going to be a lot of concern that one person got, we didn't go out and look at anybody else, and there is some that worried about noise or worried about this. I think if we go out to an RFP, get the right one, that nobody's being selected, even though the company we look at today looks very good and have a good track record. I'd rather go out on an RFP and let them win there.
Okay, so it seems that's the will of the council, and then I think there's been discussion about what their role would be in selecting the consultant, and I'd like to hear from the council on their opinion on that. Bob?
So you're asking me whether the
What portion of this decision-making process the committee should have? Realizing that this is not a traditional project because they're a nonprofit doing it for us, so it's not like they're a contractor who has a profit motive involved in it.
Well, the committee is probably concerned about the cost. Well, cost and time. So if we're going out with an RFP, the time is no longer a factor because we're going to be going out the RFP, so the time is in there. The checklist is going to be made by the city. So all of the qualified, maybe they can be helping to review the qualified applicants and eliminate the ones that are non-qualified. But I don't know what part the committee would have in it then. I mean, the checklist is, Lucille, you're going to be making a checklist to go out with the RFP. All the people that respond to it, if they meet the minimum qualifications, and the committee could be involved in that, making sure that they meet the minimum qualifications, and then I guess they will always have if the city chooses to select someone that is twice as expensive as another one that met all the minimum qualifications, then the committee should have the opportunity to say, wait a minute, company number 2 met all the minimum qualifications of our requirement, yet they're half the price, so they should have the right to object to our choice in that. So I guess what I want them to be involved in is maybe the criteria, or not the criteria. Criteria has to be the city, but maybe the weeding out of the non-qualified applicants, I guess.
Joe? As a suggestion, I hope Ms. Breeze doesn't throw something at me, but would you consider changing or adding to number 5 on page 1 of the schedule of performance and adding to number 10 on page 2 of the schedule of performance some language that says the things the city's saying it's going to do, which is issue the RFP as number 5 and enter the contract as number 10, is after good faith consultation with the foundation?
Yeah.
In both of those.
Yeah. It's a good idea. Bob?
I'm okay with that.
Dirk?
Yeah, I'm okay with it, but it seems like the only ones that have skin in the game here is the motorsports guys, and I think that the ultimate decision on who they go with should be them. I mean, personally, in my common sense world here, it's good enough for the state to contract through this agency for 10 years, but it's not good enough for us as a council to go with the recommendation. So if we're going to do the RFP, I'd like to at least get maybe 2 people in there, make it quick, and get moving.
Okay. Dwayne?
Okay.
Ashley?
I'm good with the suggestions from the city attorney.
Okay. You're probably tired of hearing from me, and that's all my pink tabs, other than the revised map that we all got. And if there are any questions on the grant, our interim city administrator is infinitely knowledgeable. The one thing I would point out, because it's been a question of the public, is there some matching sections in the grant. That is not city money. That is material and labor provided by the foundation and various contractors here in Lompoc who've already donated things. They have stuff stored all over town. And it looks like we're going to get, should I say, free bleachers? Yeah, that could be pretty exciting. Okay. Any other questions or discussion on this? Okay, let me take a shot at, oh, Joe, you got your light on. You got one more thing to say? Okay, so let me take a shot at it and see if I move that we adopt Resolution 586613, approving the application for the grant funds for the State of California Department of Parks and Recreation Off-Road Vehicle Division. I move that we approve and adopt the memorandum of understanding as we amended here, giving Joe the prerogative to wordsmith away, and we authorize the interim city administrator to sign the MOU. And I'd be looking for a second.
I'll go ahead and second it.
And everybody's clear on the amendments, right? Okay, Joe, you're clear?
Actually, you sure? You don't have to.
I like that. I like that response. Okay, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, could we vote, please? And that passes 5-0. Thank you, and we will take a 10-minute break. And if you guys who are here for the motorsports want to have some real fun, stick around for the general plan update. I'm telling you, this stuff is riveting. Okay. The chair wishes to admit that in all of this excitement, he missed one issue, and we will now come back to it so we can go on to the next thing. And that is something that the council is comfortable with to allow the foundation folks access. And I realize that we would make every effort to have some city employee come open the gate, but there will be times when they can't. And invariably, it'll be the worst time because that's the way it always works out. And so I want to offer a suggestion. And that is that we would, upon them having public liability insurance in the proverbial $1 million, we would issue 3 keys, which would be retained by the 2 committee co-chairmen and the foundation chairman. And if it leaves their possession, we would have the ability to cut off their right hand, I think would be fair, so that they can enter upon the site to take people on who are interested in making donations, and they can go on and do a survey of the debris on site so we have some kind of an idea what's there, and hopefully they can come up with a plan to save us money. Bob.
I just want to also include in there that if we have complaints that are unresolved between the 2 parties,
I agree.
the keys will be
returned
as well.
Yep, I'm good with that too. absolutely. Dirk?
Yes.
I'm good.
I have a question. What exactly does access mean? What is allowed and what's disallowed?
They have the ability to go on the site and show it to people and do a survey. Survey the debris on the site. They can't touch anything, they can't do anything, they can go look.
And then who are the responsible parties for that? Who's liable for
Those
that?
three people I just named, they're the only ones who have the ability to go on the site with others.
Does staff see a significant problem with this? I feel like it was suggested the way it was for a certain reason, and so I'm just curious.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Kevin McKeon, Public Works Director. I haven't actually asked this question of David. I know we're making a big deal about this key, and I actually don't know how he feels about it. I'm guessing, and again, this is a guess. He's a tenant. He pays us about $10,000 a year to do his activities on the airport. We've given him, up till now, exclusive rights to use that as his landing area. He uses it every day, on weekends. He uses it for parachutes to come down, and it's a safety. He wants to make sure his customers are safe. So allowing unfettered access at any time with no opportunity for coordination, he may have a concern with that. I'm just guessing. But I haven't asked him that question specifically. The way that we were approaching it was at the time that the motorsports become a tenant of the airport. Remember, that's part of the negotiation. That's phase, whatever it is, 2 or 3. As a tenant, they would be issued a key just like everybody else would be issued a key. And it's also written in there that we would have the opportunity to renegotiate the other tenant agreements to make sure it all works. Santa Barbara Skydives would need to be renegotiated and the language put in there. So I think the MOU kind of kicked that can down the road a little bit to get everybody happy together. And that's the way we were approaching it.
Are there other tenants directly adjacent besides Skydive Santa Barbara?
There are other hangars directly adjacent to the road that would lead down to the lower bench, but nobody else currently uses that as a part of their operations.
So the only thing impacted for those tenants would be access or something?
Yeah, right. Traffic, I guess, on the road, maybe. That would maybe be an impact to them.
Thank you.
Kevin, don't you think my addition to that would, stating that unless we have complaints that are unmitigated between the two parties, if no one complains, if David doesn't complain, or is it David?
David Hughes, right.
Dave, yeah.
Right.
If he doesn't complain, if none of the other tenants complain, it shouldn't be an issue.
I don't know how I would enforce someone giving me back the keys, but you're right.
Well, no, I mean,
if they don't give them back, I'll break their arms.
Okay, right. We're just trying, I am trying to be sensitive to a client that's paying us money right now. The airport has less than $20,000 in reserves, $10,000 a year in rent from him is an important tenant to the airport. He probably buys $30,000 to $40,000 worth of fuel. So he's probably, in terms of monetary, one of the most important tenants on the whole airport. So we're just proceeding carefully.
And David's a member of the committee and has been participating, and frankly, a lot of people have driven in there without permission. But I'm the mayor, so I figured I could.
Mr. Mayor?
And David's kind of been really nice about that. Yeah.
Why don't we just add that we agree to this, Kevin goes and gets permission. Gets permission ahead of time. Well, so we agree as long as you get permission from Skydive Santa Barbara first before we give the keys out.
You guys, let's think about this. We're dealing with a guy that rents a hangar, buys fuel, does everything. We got 40 acres. He's got a landing pad in it. We don't have a memorandum of understanding for this. We have no rental agreements or anything else on that lower bench that commits us to this. I'm assuming because I've asked and nothing has ever been produced. So here we're winging it. We're trying to come up with an MOU for motorsports, and we're bending over backwards for a non-documented use on that property. It's not making sense.
I think Bob's original solution was if there's an issue, then we readdress it, and if there's no issue, and you guys are going to work with David and cohabitate and play nice. because you're big boys and you can be in a sandbox together.
I would go with Bob's second suggestion, contingent upon a successful conversation, which it sounds like if there's a good relationship, it shouldn't be a problem.
I agree.
Okay, there we go. If there's a problem, come back and see us, Kevin. You're now in charge of getting it all worked out. The key master.
That's right.
And we won't call you Gozier, though. Okay, that was a lot of fun. Now let's move on. Now we'll go to item number...
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, just for clarification, the clerk needs to know who gets the keys.
The same three people I named. The two co-chairmen and the chairman of the foundation.
So my question for clarification would be, is it the individuals sitting now, those people named, or is it the position itself?
Well, if they're not in that office, they wouldn't be entitled to work on behalf of the foundation. So my logic would say it's the title and hence the person who holds the office.
And those titles are again, please?
They're the two co-chairmen of the Motorsports Committee and the chairman of the foundation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's how the council is okay with all that?
Thank you for asking, yes.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. We'll now move on to item 6. And Lucille, you're lucky. You're twice in one night.
Yes, thank you. And this is a big item for us. We're very happy to be back before the council this evening to discuss the adoption of resolution number, I feel like a drum roll or something, 5884, Prince 13, certifying the final environmental impact report and addendum for the general plan phase 1 update and findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations, and resolution number 5885, Prince 13, regarding the 2030 Phase 1 General Plan policy language for the land use element, the circulation element, land use element map changes, and introduction of ordinance number 1566, Prince 13, regarding the zoning map and text changes to the zoning ordinance. And the project before you is the Planning Commission recommendation based upon the City Council direction to hold a public hearing, adopt the aforementioned resolutions and ordinance, and for us to actually adopt Phase 1 of the 2030 General Plan. And we have indicated and attached for your review this evening an errata sheet with some simple minor corrections to the packet that you were given. They're more typographical, but that way we figured everyone could see what the proposed changes would be. We have a letter from Mr. Hibbets that was delivered by email, and we've handed that out. And we've given a copy of the land use map, which is also over on the side of the council chambers. And I would like to introduce Mr. Richard Dalton, who is our EIR consultant, who will make the presentation for this evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Just have a brief presentation tonight. I don't think I'm going to tell you a whole lot of what you don't already know, but I thought it would be good to provide a brief summary of the main components of the decisions that are before you tonight, because they are big decisions, and they're kind of culminating a very long process with that series of decisions tonight. So if we could start the presentation, thank you. Okay, and I think Lucille kind of went over this already, but just briefly, the requested action tonight is to receive and review the Planning Commission recommendations, open the public hearing, adopt a resolution basically handling the environmental items, so certifying the final EIR and EIR addendum, and approving the CEQA findings and statement of overriding considerations and the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, all required elements of the EIR process. Also to adopt the resolution adopting the general plan phase 1 elements, which includes the introduction and vision statement, the land use element, the circulation element, and the land use element map. And to waive further reading and introduce an ordinance approving the zone change, amending the city's zoning map, and making text changes to the zoning ordinance for the south side residential overlay, which I'll just briefly summarize in a moment. So just by way of background, earlier this year, there were a series of hearings before the City Council to discuss various land use decisions, policy language in the elements that were then brought forward to the Planning Commission on October 9th. And the Planning Commission recommended certification of the EIR addendum, the findings and the MMRP, adoption of the phase 1 elements, and adoption of the zoning ordinance text and map without revision from the City Council's recommendations earlier in the process. Wanted to mention that the Planning Commission had received a request from Mr. Jack Bodger, property owner in the Bailey Avenue corridor, to change the general plan land use designation on the approximately 98 acre property south of Ocean Avenue from very low density and low density residential to medium density residential, and the Planning Commission did not grant that request. Subsequently, the City Council received a request from the Bailey Avenue corridor property owners as a group to change the general plan land use designation to low density residential throughout the corridor. Staff reviewed that with City Legal Counsel and determined that such a change would be considered a substantial change to the land use element, and as such, if the Council desires to change the designations prior to adopting the resolutions, the item must be returned to the Planning Commission for consideration. Alternatively, the Council could proceed with adoption of the proposed resolutions, and the request could be returned for later Planning Commission and Council review as a general plan amendment, either by itself or in combination with the development plan on the Bailey Avenue corridor site. You are allowed 4 amendments to the general plan per year. So just to briefly summarize some of the items before you, the CEQA findings of fact. CEQA requires these basically legal findings for each impact disclosed in the environmental impact report and a statement of overriding considerations when certifying the EIR and addendum. At the City Council's previous direction, the CEQA findings of fact were revised to address the inclusion of all 4 expansion areas in the general plan urban limit line as those expansion areas were revised based on the previous discussions, and to address some additional analysis that the Council directed changes to the land use element map dealing with the land use element and zoning consistency discussion are within the range of study of the final EIR. Regarding the land use and circulation element updates themselves, just focusing here on the land use element, it was revised based on the following City Council directions. There are other items as well, but these are some of the main ones. To include all 4 expansion areas within the city's urban limit line. That would be the Y residential project or site, now the Summit View Homes project site, the Miguelito Canyon area, the river area, and the Bailey Avenue corridor, and to revise the boundary of the river and Miguelito Canyon expansion areas. Another revision was to reject the Planning Commission's previous recommendation for an architectural standard overlay on the Ocean Avenue corridor. Revision to change the land use element map on specific parcels in the South Side neighborhood to address concerns by realtors and property owners and address the zoning consistency issue, and to change land use element text to add the South Side residential overlay as part of that discussion. And as a cleanup item, due to the dissolution of the redevelopment agency, references to the RDA throughout the land use element were removed. There was also specific direction to change the implementation measure that had previously required provision of a specific plan for future development in the Bailey Avenue corridor, and it was revised as follows. The city shall require future development in the Bailey Avenue corridor, as shown on a figure, to coordinate installation of infrastructure, continuance of the existing unbroken 200-foot buffer along the Bailey Avenue corridor from North Avenue to Olive Avenue, and shall encourage interconnectivity, pedestrian and vehicular, between any future developments during the development review process. With regard to the zoning ordinance and map, as previously mentioned, based on City Council direction, the general plan land use element map was changed and the zoning map was also changed in specific areas to attain consistency between the two documents, which is one of the main goals of this overall general plan update process. Zoning ordinance also has a south side residential overlay added that's also carried across to the land use element. And the idea here is that properties in this overlay area are deemed legal conforming regardless of the underlying density requirements of their zoning district. So it's just a summary of the requested actions once again. So I'll maybe leave this up on the screen for now, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
City Attorney, would you discuss what types of amendments the council would be able to make this evening without the need to return this to the Planning Commission?
Yes, Mayor and Council. The state has a planning procedure that cities have to follow. And the procedure is a planning procedure when trying to amend or modify a general plan. The Planning Commission has to be given the opportunity to review the matter, and then when it comes to the City Council can't propose substantial changes to what the Planning Commission reviewed without sending it back to the Planning Commission for another review by the Planning Commission. So, for example, the thing that was on the slides, there was a suggestion to have the City Council modify the land use map or the land use provisions to change something on the map from very low density to low density. That's the kind of significant change that would have to go back to the Planning Commission. You couldn't just do that on your own.
Okay. And just because I know there are a number of issues that all of us are carrying forward, particularly our commitment to the 70-some industrial property holders who were downzoned to residential by a prior council that we have said we would look into once we solve this. When we get done with this, assuming we're reaching approval tonight, I will ask the council to create an agenda item which would be kind of a cleanup of all of the miscellaneous issues that we all know are out there to begin next year for one of our 4 general plan and text amendments. So whatever you have that falls into the category that would cause us to start over tonight, we will put all those together unless we feel the need to send this back to the Planning Commission, when I certainly hope we don't.
That concluded my presentation, so I'm available for any questions.
Are there any questions before I open this for oral communications? Seeing no lights, we'll go to oral communications. This is your moment in life to talk to us about the general plan update. Come on down.
Good evening, Mayor Lynn and members of the council. I'm Ken Huff, staff with the Santa Barbara County Action Network. For 12 years, we've been encouraging workforce housing, efficient transportation, and protection of open space, and especially ag land. I've read your general plan vision, and there's a lot to like in there. There's a vision of economic prosperity, a compact urban place nestled among natural hillsides and so forth. There's affordable place for people to live and integrated transportation network. So all things that are right in line with what we would advocate. And my aim will be to be here to advocate for those things when there's something good in front of you that you might want to approve, and maybe some neighbors don't want to see it, and maybe it's too compact for them. You know, I want to be here and be helping you along with those good things. So there's a lot of good stuff in here. There's one big thing in the first sentence of the community vision that that I don't like, and it says, "and straddling the biologically rich San Ynez River." And you've heard me say it before, and the Planning Commission heard it. I mean, this is such a great buffer. You've got a lot of policies in here that talk about protecting ag land, and the river's a great buffer to protect the ag land to the east. And, I mean, you really don't straddle it. There's a park on the other side, but your city is primarily on the west side. It's on one side of the river. There's a lot of goals that are very good, especially ones that have to do with compact urban form and, again, affordable and attractive mixed-use neighborhoods, balance of employment and housing, high-quality infill. And there are a lot of great policies, and just for a couple of them, there's encouragement of community gardens, and I'm working on one of those with the Central Coast Green Team up in Santa Maria, and it's a lot of fun and rewarding. I'm glad to see that encouraged, and all through there's encouragement of bike and pedestrian facilities just sprinkled among all of the many goals. But then you get down to policy 5.3, and it says to help preserve ag land on a regional basis, the city should encourage Santa Barbara County to protect the most productive agricultural soils in the Lompoc Valley and surrounding areas. And I just feel this is disingenuous when you've got policy 1.6 that identifies these expansion areas, and one of which, especially Bailey Avenue, but the river area as well. I think 3 of them have prime ag within them, and Bailey is totally prime ag. So it does seem disingenuous to be, let's encourage the county to do it. I mean, you can do it. If you want to protect prime ag, then as the plan says you do, then don't annex it and don't support its development. On page 53 of the findings of fact and overriding considerations, it concludes that there will be significant impacts on ag land. This will be mitigated to the extent feasible by the policies that promote a compact form. Well, SBCAN just does not understand how it can be infeasible to allow farming to continue on prime ag land in a valley that was settled because of its agricultural potential. Page 53 also says the expansion areas may be consistent with LAFCO policies. And I just read those policies today, and I just can't imagine how the expansion areas are consistent with their policies. So SBCAN strongly urges your council to reverse course, focus on compact growth in line with your general plan policies, and do not plan to expand onto prime ag land. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Who's next?
Art Hibbets. You have my letter, so I won't go over that. I just like to summarize a couple points. I think what Ken said goes to the heart of the matter, and really the bottom line of my comments, I think you guys need to get on with it. This has gone on so long that staff is retired, gone other places. The mayor has passed away. City council members have come and gone. This has gone on way too long. It's time to get on with it. Your proposal that we have at your first opportunity to look at the general plan, that's fine. We'll take our thoughts forward. Let's get this out of here, okay? So I have a little bit of time, and I'd just like to say that the issue of the way legal things are done, I understand you want an ironclad document. Your attorney has prepared great findings and statements of overriding consideration. And you certainly don't want to get sued by EDC again. I think we all agree that's a fairly unproductive and expensive way to do business. On the other hand, I look at these findings, and it makes a pretty blanket statement that, oh, it's all in the administrative record. Well, I'm sorry, I haven't had time to read literally thousands of pages and hundreds of hours of tapes and video, and I doubt if you have either. So to make that statement, I think it's wishful thinking, and I'm sorry, but have at it, and we'll have a little time to study this, and we'll see who's right. So thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Robert Schmidtke, I'm a resident of Lompoc. I believe the city has finally got it right. No one's saying by moving the line out to Bailey Avenue and the other places that anyone's forcing any farmer not to grow his rutabagas there. What we are doing is what's been done in America for 200 years. We're letting people decide for themselves and getting government out of their ears. We're not changing this. I say, nope, you can't grow anything there. No, we're saying if you choose to sell your land and you want to build a subdivision there for folks to live here and farm on the other side of the street, that's fine. But at least now you can. We've stopped downzoning properties on the interior, so we have affordable housing within this community. And a lot of it's improved greatly. I know the stuff I bought has. I keep putting money into it. But the Bailey Avenue corridor, that should be just as this council has decided, because that's the greatest, best use for the most people and the most freedom for our citizens. Too often and far too much, I find that government impinges on the folks. If you want to know, if you want to depend on government to run your life, ask the Indians how that's worked out for them in the last few hundred years. What we're doing is not doing that. What we're doing is setting our citizens free. What we're doing here, what this council has done, is to open this city up to the best of their ability for future growth for the citizens. And I think that is the best way to go. You will find people that are hinting at lawsuits and this and that and the other. All too many times, instead of legislation, we have litigation now. That comes from a time in the 60s that it grew out of control. But this council, in your decisions that you've made recently on the general plan, have been very good, and I think you should stick with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, Skylar, I live in Lompoc. Mayor and Council. You're in the plan there was the basic ways to go, north, south, east, or west. And I really feel today that going to Bailey Avenue with our urban limit line is a good move. You got an opportunity there for the straight line, and I think the line will hold. Crossing the river, that's really, I can go both ways on that one. There, the canyon, I don't know, is enough up the canyon to be worth it. Going to the north is another option. But, we do have to show in our plan that we have the capability to grow by a certain percent. That's I believe, state law. So it's not that you're going to build houses or anything. It's if the opportunity comes, where are you going to put them? And so I would like to see Bailey Avenue brought back or reinstated to have the 200-foot buffer and bring it into the city of Lompoc. It makes sense to me. Art and I discussed it a lot of times, but I think it just gives it a chance. You got two very, very prominent landmarks: the wastewater plant and the landfill, and I don't think any one of those are going anywhere for a while. So, just the city stops there, and the ag starts west from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Mr. Mayor and the City Council. My name is Jack Bodger. I represent John Bodger and Sons. We are a landowner in the Bailey Corridor, as you know, and I don't think I need to review all of the points that I've made many times in the past. I just want to say that I support your decision to include the Bailey Corridor within the urban limit line. It's already in there as a result of the 1998 general plan, and I think it needs to remain there. And as the gentleman said before me, it simply gives each landowner in that corridor the opportunity to bring forth a plan if he chooses and when he chooses. And I totally support that decision. Just kind of a little bit of a coincidental update. I was just on the phone today talking to Western Ag, which is my contractor for doing chemical spraying. And once a year we do spray parts of our home ranch for weed control. And he reminded me, and I agreed, that we shouldn't do that kind of spraying during the week when school is in session, because Miguelito School is right adjacent to our land. And so we're going to be doing that spraying on a Saturday, weather permitting. And so that's just an example of how the city has grown out around our property. It has impacted what we do there and when. And I think it makes perfect sense to include us within the urban limit line because we have houses on 3 sides of our land. So thank you very much for your decision, and I support it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Oop.
Mayor, City Council, Joyce Howerton, Lompoc. Gosh, it's a little bit sad to follow Jack Bodger. When he was talking, I was thinking about the flag that his family planted out on the land a couple different times and how beautiful that was, and you know how meaningful it was to a lot of people in the community, not just ours, but across the United States. And you know, he had requested that he wanted the zoning to be changed to medium density, so I suspect it won't be much longer than we'll have a proposal to put houses on that land. And as you know, if you've read you know very much about sensible growth in communities, housing is not the way to go to have a livable community. You know, it's just, it's a done deal. When we first started these hearings, we packed this room and people have just dropped off. Most of them feel like there's no sense in coming, you know, that they're not being heard. When you have people coming and talking about the farmland to the east and west of this city that is the most prime farmland in the state, and that instead we keep our urban limit line out there, and we do that so that there's potential to grow, and by growth we mean, you know, to build more houses. And I can't think of anything that would destroy a community sooner than to put houses upon houses on land that used to feed people. But, you know, it looks like there's not a whole lot that can be done here. I think it's a bad decision. I'm really sorry to see you do it for a lot of reasons. I envision Lompoc I had these great visions for Lompoc, this wonderful, livable community. We do infill. We would go up, not out. We would have people be able to walk and shop. And, you know, it looks like that's probably just a pipe dream. That we've talked about, you know, going over the river. Nobody talks about going over the river. That's just not done in good planning. And we're going to probably build on, you know, good farmland. So I don't know why I came tonight. I guess I felt like I just needed to come for one last time. I would like to make a couple comments, though, because I think they're very important, and it's just a suggestion in terms of how to maybe conduct a meeting next time. That this was the first item on the agenda, and the room was packed with people, and so you move the agenda item around, and I see that happen quite a bit, and that's certainly appropriate. But it might be a better idea to do that before you have public comment, because for myself, I'm paying a caregiver, and I would have liked the opportunity to have gotten up and made a couple comments, you know, in the beginning of the meeting if I had known this was going to be changed this late. And then the other comment I have, and I think it's a little humorous, throughout the years when we've had people from the ag community come, very respectable people, or people from community groups, they're asked, where they have a number of times have been asked, well, where are you from? Do you live in Lompoc? Are you from here? As if you don't, there's something wrong with that. And yet tonight, when I was listening to the hearing before this one, and a number of times it was pointed out, we had people from Camarillo and all over coming, and somehow that's a really good thing. So I think we need to or you need to get your act together. It's either a good thing to have people from outside this area speak, or it's not a good thing, but it shouldn't go by what the project is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else after Nick? Come on down.
Honorable Mayor, council members, Nicholas Gonzalez, resident of Lompoc. I think it's time. I firmly believe that the Bailey Corridor is important. I don't necessarily believe in housing, but I believe in jobs. I've reiterated many times on this here that we are in need of jobs. So by retaining the areas that are now presented to you opens up many job opportunities. At one point when I was able to serve on the Planning Commission, I had mentioned that it doesn't necessarily have to be housing. I had mentioned an example of Windset Farms. I was kind of mocked by a couple of people in the audience, and today you can find their produce all over our stores here in the Central Coast. Think outside the box. Don't be boxed in, and create jobs. We desperately need them. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing anyone else rise, we'll close oral communications, come back to the council. Councilmember Holmdahl.
Yes, I'm real glad to see this plan come before us tonight. Everybody talks about Bailey Avenue, and it is sad that we had to lose that agricultural land, but it was lost many, many years ago when the city of Lompoc put the sewer line down the middle of that property and assessed the landowners for that. Now, if we don't do something with it and give them that right to either develop or something on that property, they can come back and sue us for all that sewer line and everything else and the cost of that down the road. If we win or lose, who knows? The one plus, I remember Bob Campbell came before this council 6 years ago and said, oh, we got problems now with stuff leaving the homeowner's property and getting it on ours, and so we got problems. With the buffer that we're going to have along Bailey Avenue, that all the way up and down there, it'll be the only buffer of agriculture and city in the county of Santa Barbara. And that buffer is there to stay, and it's not going to be removed. I know there's people who say, well, it's not going to last. And then it will last. And I think there's some major issue we hate to lose agricultural land. But those property owners also have some rights. And if we've stopped them they can't develop unless it's inside the city and everything else. So they have some rights too, those property owners, and they've had it for a long time. It isn't just overnight property. And they've owned it probably as long as Art's owned his property. And so I think that's one thing we got to look at. They have some rights that they should have. And what we're giving them is the right. They don't have to build on it. We give them the rights to go ahead and develop the way they want to, but they're going to have to come back in. We're not asking anybody to go out there and put a house on it. We just give them the right to use their land the way they should. The overall operation of the whole development plan I'm very pleased with. I'm glad to see we have it done. And I also, there was some concern I had earlier on, is that the questions asked for zoning change from low density to very low density. We will not even worry about it tonight. If they want to do it, they can bring it back in the future. And I think that's, to me, the plan is good. I'm glad to see what we have. And we've only been working on it since '97.
Councilmember Lingle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well,
I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that's in this room that as long as I've been on the council, I've been opposed to moving west. I agree that the Bailey Avenue area and everything west of that is prime ag land, and I wish we had not decided to move the urban limit line, but we have. And I made my feelings known during the last hearing on this. I don't think it's going to make any difference to try to change any of your minds, so I'm not going to argue bringing it back or leaving it outside the urban limit line. I think Mr. Hibbett said it right. It's about time that we finally move on to this. I do have some concerns still. Councilmember Humdahl just said the buffer is going to be there forever. I hope you're right. I really do. But we can't guarantee that. There's nothing that we can do tonight that will guarantee that buffer is going to be here 5, 10, 15 years from now. I hope future councils see the benefit of this buffer line and they let it stand. But nothing we do tonight is going to guarantee that. So I respect the decision of the council that we made, that we moved the urban limit line. I wish we hadn't, but I'm not going to fight it anymore. I think Mr. Hibbett said it right. It's time to move on.
Councilmember Costa.
Thank you, Marilyn. Councilmember Lingle, thank you for your statements. You and I were the dissenting votes on that previously, and I wanted to add not only for Bailey Avenue, but also for the inclusion of River Park within the urban limit line. So that was on that piece as well. And I believe those were the only two dissenting areas. Everywhere else there was agreement. So I just wanted to restate my feelings about that as well. But I don't want to drag this out. But I do believe that we are at the point of needing to move forward. And Marilyn, I wanted to briefly comment on the idea of I already see the need for an amendment, which in a perfect world it would go back to the Planning Commission, but we all understand that that's not where we want to go at this time. But if you could just restate, because I do have some things specifically in regards to the land use element, and I want to, and I believe that they would be substantial enough that it would require the Planning Commission review, and I don't want to do that. But if you could just restate what the plan was, or what your suggestion was to that effect.
As soon as we deal with this and either approve it or do something, another alternative, that we will then move to, I will propose an agenda item to clean up various issues that each of us have, and we'll list those and also give the staff the opportunity to put their cleanup items in there, and we'll begin considering that after the first of the year.
Okay, I do have one question for Ms. Breeze or for the consultant. When was the last time staff was able to include information or make changes to the general plan update? Was it before the last most recent Planning Commission hearing, or did it have to be prior to that?
Well, I think that, there have been some minor cleanup items that have been brought forward tonight. But before that, anything more substantial would have been before the last Planning Commission. Nothing since then.
Right, but technically you had up until the last Planning Commission to change the general plan update.
Right, and you would theoretically could change it again tonight. It would just have to go back to Planning Commission.
Right. The only reason I say that is I just wanted to let everybody know where I'm going with this is the City Council passed the Heal Cities resolution, which was adopted in September 18th of 2012. So much before the latest Planning Commission hearing, and part of that resolution states under the implementation section of the resolution, there was a goal under built environment, and that goal read, support the health and wellness policies in the land use element of the proposed 2030 City of Lompoc General Plan update. I know that it was difficult because we had such limited staff over the last year. Nobody was really provided the direction to follow through on the resolution, but I do think that that is missing in the land use element. There is quite a bit more in the circulation element, and I value that, but I do have quite a few suggestions for that land use element, but I think that that would be substantial enough. It would have to go back to Planning Commission, so I'm willing to wait for the amendment process. I just want to let everybody know that that's where I'm going, and I think that that's the appropriate course of action. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Holmdahl? Oh, you had a bite at the apple. Everybody's got one but me. With regard to some points that were made, Mr. Huff spoke about the issue of being on both sides of the river, and I think what you might remember is that on this side of town, we are on both sides of the river, both with the college, the prison, which is in the city, the housing, which is up on the hill, and the Burton Ranch project, which is also on that side of the river. So I don't think the river part of this specifically relates to the land east. As a matter of fact, within the policies, there are a number of them that relate to the fact that we don't want to move on to prime agricultural lands to the east. I understand the sensitivity with regard to the Bailey Avenue properties, but again, to Councilmember Holmdahl's point, we took their money a very long time ago and provided them, in theory, some opportunity, and at that time, Lompoc was going to expand all the way to Ocean Park, and in fact, right about where the artichoke breeding facility is now, there were homes put in called Marina, and they were in the middle of putting them up when the mole project crashed, and they left the lumber and went back to LA, and a number of houses in town were built with that free lumber, I guess. I wasn't here then. So, you know, as time has changed, as time has passed, things have changed. To Councilmember Lingel's point, no, there's absolutely nothing we do that is completely permanent. But the thing that we can do that will make it more permanent is to create a structure that allows for the metered growth that we expect and to provide the types of services that we think that growth will need, and to provide the opportunities for infill where it will work. There was a lot of talk about the H Street corridor infill and the potential to build X number of housing units, which we included in the general plan because it's a possibility. But the realistic thing is most of the buildings on North H Street were either built or refurbished in the last 15 years, and so people aren't going to go in there and tear them down in the near term. But what we do is we put a carrot out there, and so when one is going to be torn down or one is going to be modified and now it's economically viable, because it's not economically viable, they're not going to do it. So you put the carrot in place, and then sure enough, somebody will come along and go, hey, I can use that carrot. And that's what we've done all through this general plan, is place a lot of carrots in place to get the type of projects that we want. You've heard me say it, but I'm going to say it one more time. We're the 7th most compact city in the United States, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, and I think we're all proud of that. But we're not a crowded place. So if you look at some of the other cities on the list, they're crowded places. We're not. We have an open, airy feeling because we have never put in a large number of large lots, say like the hills of Santa Barbara where they had very large lots. Most of our home lots are typical 7R1, 6 and change to the acre, and by doing that, we have completed that compact urban form. I agree with Mr. Hibbets and Mr. Gonzalez. It is time that we move on. Do I think this is a perfect document? No. Right, as soon as we make a decision, assuming it's to go forward, I'm going to propose some changes that I think we need to make, and there's one I'm going to propose now, and I talked to the city attorney about it beforehand, so it would not send us back to the Planning Commission. It's a 2-word change that would solve some problems. Are we on tap with our community vision? And just so that you all understand it, I read every single page of this yet again, and I read the original EIR yet again because I wanted to be certain that I understood everything. And I ended up with a lot of little pink stickies that then the staff was kind enough to lead me through. So I think I feel really comfortable. The last time I hadn't read it maybe as well as I should have, but I spent 3 days on it, so I'm feeling pretty good about it now. The one thing that I think we should change would be the title mixed use. I don't care what we change it to, but the problem that we have with that title, I don't want to change what it does, I don't want to change anything. Just the title is a horrible, horrible problem for someone trying to get finance a piece of property. From the conversation of the realtors in previous meetings, it's basically the kiss of death in trying to get financing. I am familiar with one property owner who confided in me that he just let the property go back to the bank because he couldn't sell it. And he didn't own it, so he couldn't finance it. And I'm familiar with 2 other property owners who sold theirs and financed it as you know, owner-sellers. So we need to change that, and I asked Joe for a new name, and he's failed me. Have you thought of one yet, Joe? No pressure.
I came up with 4 options, but
Good.
There's no magic to what I'm proposing.
I just, you know, you're going to do a better job than I'm going to do.
And actually, let me ask Ms. Breeze if she was able to find anything. I know she was also going to search.
Or our kind consultant who's been everywhere and done everything. No pressure.
No?
Yeah, see, that's what I said, and Joe said no. Okay, Joe, take your best shot.
So the 4 that I came up with were walkable development use, new urbanism use, connected urban use, or urban revitalization use.
No, we can't use mixed. Mixed is bad. I like connected. That sounds pretty cool. Now, Ken, this is scary, but do you have an input on this? Because you've been all over California. That's why I think you might have. Have you heard of anything? And you have to say it in the microphone if you have. No, you're no help either. Well, at least I'm not paying you to be no help.
Mayor Lynn, my suggestion would be the first option, which was walkable development use.
I don't like that one myself.
I really like that one.
I know.
You know,
I
just to kind of jump.
no, sorry.
Yeah, I know you.
I want to jump to the front of the line, but who says that one of these won't put us in the same position with loans that mixed use has got us in right now? I mean, we're just stabbing in the dark here. I'd really like to maybe just step back on this and come at it again.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, these bankers, these loan people are going to say, what is that? I've never heard of that. Well, it used to be mixed use. I mean, who are we trying to kid?
Yeah, it'll be like, did a lawyer come up with that?
Clerk.
Okay, never mind. People will be stuck for another 9 months until we figure something out. Glad it's not my property. Okay, that's all I got. Be looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be glad to move the recommendations that we have before us. If we're going down, am I right on receive and review the planning commission we have? But 3 would be what we're adopting, right? Adopt resolution number 58.
Am I correct, Lucille? B, C, and D?
Okay.
2 resolutions and 1 ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the agenda. 3, 4, and 5 on the staff report, and B, C, and D on the agenda.
That's right. That's for motion.
I think you got to say it.
Okay. Move the recommendation that council take the following hold of public hearing, which you did consider the material, adopt resolution 586613, approving the application for, is that the right one?
No, you're on the wrong page. Flip over.
Oh, that's right. Jesus.
You need to be on item 6.
Back here.
Oh, I knew there was something wrong.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Adopt resolution 5884, 13, certifying the final environmental impact addendum to the general plan phase 1 update, adopt CEQA findings of fact of statement of overriding considerations and mitigation monitoring and reporting programs, and direct staff a notice of determination. You want the next two, right?
Yeah, just keep going.
Adopt resolution number 5885, 13, adopting the general plan phase 1 element, introduction and vision land use circulation and land use element map, and waive further reading and introduce ordinance number 156613, approving the zoning change ZC 10-01, amending the city zoning map and text change to the zoning ordinance for the south side residential overlay.
And a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Lingle.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to again say that I will be voting approval on this, but is with some reservation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can we vote, please? That passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, now in keeping with what I said when we started, I hereby ask council to agree to a future agenda item to clean up various issues with regard to the general plan, and that each council member would submit those issues to the staff, and the staff would add their cleanup issues and bring it back to us for consideration in the first quarter of next year. And the only one I'm going to personally speak on now is the one that we all agreed to, which was our promise to the 72 parcel holders who were downzoned from industrial to residential to review their downzoning.
Mayor Lynn, does that have to go to the Planning Commission first, or are you stating it comes to Council, Planning Commission, and then Council?
It comes to Council first so we can set an agenda of the items we want the Planning Commission to review, and then it goes to the Planning Commission for review and comes back to Council. I would just ask each council member to submit their list so we don't have to sit here and talk about it now. Each one would submit their list to the city administrator, and then the city staff would put their cleanup requests in, and then it'll come back to us for first look.
And Ms. Breeze, can the amendment process take place concurrently with phase 2 of the general plan update?
That would be our intention, Councilmember Costa, to do that.
Thank you, so Mayor, I support that.
Okay, and I'd be looking for a nod from everybody. Dirk, good? Okay, so let the record reflect that all 5 council members are in support of this. Is there anything else anyone has on the general plan? Okay. So now we will move to written communications. Do we have any written communications?
Nothing.
And oral communications, your last 2 minutes to speak to us on any subject. Anyone have anything else to say? Everyone that's rising is running. So we're done with that. No oral communications. And now we'll come back for council requests, comments, meeting reports, etc. From the left for a change.
I have nothing to report.
Just saying that we had the last meeting I went to was, of course, talking about the fire, and also I went to the airport committee meeting, and then we also had an interview with the city manager.
Councilmember Starbuck?
I have no reports.
Councilmember Lingle?
See, on Tuesday, the 12th, we all attended the joint meeting with the Public Safety Commission and the Fire Department for the Fire Department Master Plan. This past Saturday and Sunday, along with the rest of you, I attended the City Administrator interviews. And yesterday, I had a wonderful day driving 12 hours up to Sacramento and back for an NCPA meeting. And the only thing at city expense was the city did pay my mileage for that trip to Roseville.
Okay, I attended a number of events, most notably the North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection winter event in Santa Maria, their annual fundraiser. It was wonderful. A lot of funds were raised, and thanks to everybody that participated. And I had a number of other meetings. There were so many last week I lost track. I testified before the County Board of Supervisors on behalf of Lompoc, City of Lompoc, with regard to the oil project, and I also testified with the Planning Commission with regard to the conditional use permit for the soccer fields Mr. Mosby's trying to get in. In both cases, we lost 3-2. I have a couple council requests. The first one is, this is a letter from the hotels in Lompoc who are asking for a funds advance on the T-bid because they will not receive funding until the end of the first quarter. And I would ask the council to agree with me to agendize this with the next round of discussions on it's not a T-bid.
It's on the agenda for the 3rd. Could you include it?
Yeah, that's the goal, to include this discussion with the agenda on the 3rd, and that it would be included in their, MOU? No, what'd you call it? MOU. So, and then 2 people to nod up and down and agree to that. Okay. There is a contract review coming let me start over. The building department contract is coming up for renewal. It is my recollection that we said we wanted to go out for an RFP on this, but that's my recollection. This would be the second renewal of the existing contract. A number of other companies have expressed interest and sent letters to the city wanting to be involved in the RFP. I think our current contractor has done a good job at facilitating. However, I am disappointed that the digital plan check, which was promised back when we adopted this, has never come on board. And I would like to see what's out there, remembering that when we did the original contract, we had very little work going through the city, and hence our rate that was agreed to in the contract was based on that. There has been one renegotiation that lowered the rate, but I think now, given the volume of work we have going through the planning department with an RFP, we might see a cost reduction, which would be net revenue to the city, and we all know how bad we need the money. So I would like to have agendize a discussion of whether the council wishes to renew the existing contract or go out for an RFP. And I would be looking for 2 more folks on that.
I like the company we have right now, so I would not be in favor of it.
Okay, Dirk?
Is this a council job?
If we don't do something, the current contract is going to be renewed. So if we want to talk about going for an RFP, we would have to take an action.
Well, I don't mind throwing a line in the water, seeing what's out there, I guess.
That's the way I look at it. Dwayne?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Go for it. Okay. Ashley?
I guess if it was council's original intent, that's what should be done regardless. At the very least, I guess what would be helpful for me would be a short memo from staff, just with an update on that, like what was the original action taken by council and what was the original intent of council?
We'll get that along with the council discussion. And then I handle the general plan, and that one's done. Yeah. Okay, that's it. I got it all. Anything else from anybody? Last chance. Okay, so the Lompoc City Council will adjourn to a regular meeting at 7:00 p.m. on December 3rd, 2013. Thank you for your time.